Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We have quite a few members joining us, and we're going to give them a couple more minutes so that they don't miss any of the presentation. We're at around 1,000, and it's increasing quite a bit in just a minute. So we're going to give them a couple more minutes to join, and then we'll be right back with you. Thank you for your patience. Hello, everyone, again. Thanks for joining us. Sorry, we thought that we had the slideshow on, and we didn't. So while we were waiting, you got to see us. What happens while we're waiting? All right, let's get started here today. I think we've got about 1,300 flight attendants on. We're so happy you're all joining us for our first town hall, the first of 4. So this isn't the only one. It will be recorded, and it will be on our website, just like all of our town halls are. So for your friends who missed it, they can see it on the website. It's been 3 years since we restarted the negotiations after the COVID pause. We feel like it's been about 10. For some on the team, it's been 6 years. This is the first time in APFA history that we have had transparent negotiations. It was definitely time for change. We shared everything in our proposals with you for as long as we could. As you know, we had to stop that when we went to DC and we were working with the NMB. We shared with you our opening economic proposal. Why did we do that? Because you deserve to know what your negotiators are negotiating at the table. You deserve to know what the company wants from our contract. You have all played a significant role in these negotiations. Now you see how it works. We start high and they start low. Remember, their economic proposal until April of this year was an 11% raise and boarding pay. No retro pay, no per diem. Then they offered in May but 17% with nothing else. Historically, today, we would be unveiling the entire contract that we negotiated. You wouldn't know anything until now. Instead, we've shared with you what's been agreed upon throughout this entire process. It's been 3 years of you following our negotiating team, following the proposals, and now trying to understand the economics and the final agreements in this contract. Without your support at the 7 system-wide pickets, 2 first ever worldwide pickets where we were with flight attendants from other airlines, from other unions, 7 pop-up pickets, including some of the most heated ones here in Dallas, Wall Street, JP Morgan, the White House, and 3 state-of-the-art airlines. This agreement would not have happened without you. You made it happen. You wore your red pins, your red lanyards, your red t-shirts to training, those scary t-shirts. You're ready to strike and no retro way, no way, bag tags, and it has made the difference. I am so proud of this membership. And you all should be proud of yourselves and your coworkers. You made this contract happen. You made this strike threat real to management and definitely to the government. This has been a battle, a fight, and a war. When we were ordered to DC, the government knew the American airline flight attendants were ready and eager to do whatever it takes to get this agreement done. And we were ready. 2 requests to be released. The threat of the release to strike helped us to get this done. The threat was real and it was definitely used. We have been in nonstop intensive negotiations from the beginning of May until July when we got it done. The Secretary of Labor, Julie Sue, was talking with us every day. She definitely helped us get this done. The Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, was also very involved. The NMB met with us every day and night. The government was definitely involved in these negotiations. Everyone was working to try and help us get this deal done. After all of that, we knew that we had squeezed all of the money we could get out of this management team. It was time to get the deal done or sit out here for months, possibly longer. And it was time to give it to you to make the decision. I've said it to our union leadership, our reps, our contract action team, our call center who's here in the room with us. We are here to provide you with as much information as we can for you to make an informed decision on your vote. We're not here to sell you the contract. You will make the decision. And today, we are here to share the facts with you. So let's get started. You can submit questions. Believe me, I can tell you already know this because there's a lot of questions coming in. And we're going to try and answer as many of those questions as we can today. If yours is not answered, we have a town hall next Tuesday. We'll be working on some of the questions that we don't get answered today, if that happens. And we will also put it out in FAQs. And we have 4 town halls scheduled that are virtual. We have 10 base visits scheduled. Every town hall that we do every week is not going to be the same as last week. We are going to take what we have, the questions we've been asked, the questions that our contract action team is getting, the questions that our call center is getting, and we're going to use those in our town halls. But they will all be on the website for you to be able to view. We have with us today Dan Akins and Joe Burns, and they are going to start this out and go over the economics of this agreement. Dan, if you could just introduce yourself, and then Joe, okay? Trevor. Sure. I think everybody pretty much knows who Joe is. He is the negotiating lawyer that's been with us for 3 years. But Dan, I know we've probably got a few on the call today that don't know who you are.
Yeah, thanks, Julie, for that introduction. My name is Dan Akins. I'm an air transport economist, which is kind of a weird job, but my job is principally to help unions negotiate contracts for the benefit of their members and assess the amount of value in the contracts. I've been doing this for about 40 years for all kinds of union groups. I've also done bankruptcy work on behalf of unions. I've done arbitrations, gone to court on behalf of unions, and been involved with mergers in the 90s. I've worked with a variety of AFA flight attendant groups, TW flight attendants at Southwest, Teamsters flight attendants around the industry, plus pilots, mechanics, rampers. Essentially, my job in your contract negotiations is to try to provide an assessment of the industry. Where's the industry going in terms of labor, in terms of operations, in terms of demand, in terms of financial success, et cetera? And how does that play into our contract negotiations? In good times, we can negotiate strong contracts. In weaker times, after 9/11, after the 2008 financial meltdown, after bankruptcy, it's sometimes difficult to negotiate beneficial contracts because of circumstances. And it's part of my job to assess that. It's also part of my job to assess the competitive environment for labor, which is more beneficial to labor since COVID than any time I can remember. And the pilots were the ones that struck first. Flight attendants, our group, Southwest and Alaska, have just reached TAs, if not ratified agreements over the past year. And they're historic. And you'll see in this presentation the historic value of this contract. It's no easy feat to do battle with a multi-billion-dollar company. They can hire whoever they want. They've got scores of people on their finance team, their legal team. And so we're kind of the little engine that could. And one of the things that was amazing during this contract negotiation that Julie just spoke about was the Department of Labor involvement, the Department of Transportation involvement, an unprecedented engagement by Washington and local politicians to help us get this contract done. The contract is the most important thing that a union does. It's a legally binding document that governs your work life and your pay and your income and your retirement. So of all the things a union does to protect the interest of flight attendants, this document that you're about to hear the highlights of is the most important thing that a union does. And I'm really proud to have been with your group to negotiate this and be with them through thick and thin. So let's go through the slides. First couple of them, I guess I'll be sharing, with Joe. I guess, Joe, do you want to talk? Do you want to add anything, Joe?
You can start.
Okay.
Dan, you
in
can start
terms
on
of
the first slide, and I'll go on the second.
Okay, in terms of the overall value of the contract, it's valued against what would have been valued at American or cost American to provide flight attendants pay and retirement and benefit rules as if nothing changed from the current agreement. So you measure how much value has been added over the period of time, in this case 5 years, to the total value of the contract as if nothing changed. And that value is a record number. It's $4.2 billion. It's over 5 years. So if you do the math, you can see it's, 800,000 or so, in 800 million or so in terms of value on top of the current contract per year. The biggest part of the contract in terms of value is the pay scales. They've gone up over the course of 5 years, 33 to 36%. And it's important to understand that it's not the individual flight attendant's pay that goes up by that. It's the pay scales. The steps on each level of years of service go up 33 to 36%. And as you'll see, no other contract that on the LUS or LAA side has gone up by that much in recent memory. The total value of the contract adds 37% to all the costs that American pays for their flight attendants. The $4.2 billion increase is largely composed of pay rates, 401k increases, per diem increases, profit sharing increases, this new item that we'll discuss in depth, boarding pay, retro over $500 million, and several other smaller items. If you add all that up, it equals $4.2 billion in value. If you divide that by the full-time number of flight attendants, it averages about $160,000 in increased value. Again, most of it was in pocket change money that was not benefits, although there were improvements. Most of this is money that's going to go into the flight attendant's pocket. So on average, the average flight attendant would make $160,000 more over the next 5 years than if we didn't have a new contract. We've also got industry-leading compensation. If you combine the average pay rate that flight attendants make in the new deal, plus the boarding pay component, we're at the top of the industry with this contract. Next slide, please.
Okay, Dan, I'll jump in here.
Thanks.
Okay, hey everybody. So I'm Joe Burns. I'm the General Counsel of AFA, but I've also been the lead negotiating attorney on your negotiations and helping you guys fight to get this agreement. I'm going to talk a little bit about the bargaining. We're going to go a little bit over the overview, me and Dan, and then we are going to have the committee walk through each of the sections, so you'll get all of the language that was agreed to. But, when we think back in the course of these negotiations, we had a series of battles with the company, and the company at various stages took kind of a, sort of take it or leave it approach to negotiations, which wasn't helpful. But for a long time, they were saying, we're never going to go above Delta. That is, and then when Delta would offer an increase, they would offer an increase. And we said, we're not going to let a non-union carrier, set the bargaining for us. And that you're going to have to do a contract that meets our needs, even if it is, which wasn't the case, above Delta. The company fought us on the issue of retro pay. Their version of retro pay was not to have retro pay, but rather to have a very small signing bonus. And their proposals in that area were frankly very, very insulting and weren't really based on compensating for flight attendants for the lost income. So sort of beating them back and getting over $500 million in retro pay took a considerable amount of effort to get there. The 401k, Dan will walk through it, but your previous 401k here was insufficient and compared with the industry. We were able to add 3.5% to that to improve it. So now it's among the top of the industry. On per diem, you would think it would be simple that the company would understand that, per diem food prices have gone up. But we had to battle the company on per diem to match the pilots on at the date of signing, and also to get increases in the out years. Flight attendants for years have been rightfully pointing out that flight attendants don't get paid for all hours worked, and in particular during the boarding period. We were able to secure boarding pay, which is a significant step forward. But also in the course of negotiations, the company came to us and was very insistent that they wanted to receive scheduling concessions. And, our position, the position of your committee was, hell no, we're not going to give you any concessions, and we're going to fight you tooth and nail. And, I think we're pleased to say that we were able to do that. The committee will walk through in detail the sort of specifics of the work rule improvements that were won, which add up to a lot more flexibility, and then other provisions that we were able to gain in terms of sit regs and retiree health and vacation and so forth, or sick leave payout. Okay, so that's kind of the overview of what was achieved in the negotiations. I'm going to talk a little bit about, how we got there on the key items. And, frankly, back in the end of April, we were very far apart. We were billions of dollars apart. The company was holding at the Delta rates and low increases in the out years. They did not have retro pay on the table, did not have per diem increases. Julie talked about how we were in DC for, most of May and June. We spent a 3-week straight mediation in Dallas, and then the mediation board called us to DC. And I've been bargaining for 30 years, and I can tell you that was highly unusual. I've never seen the level of involvement of the board and the White House in a flight attendant negotiations. And, I think a large part of that is testimony to the, great contract campaign that we put up and the strike threat. So when we went to DC, we were billions of dollars apart. But, little by little, we were able to force the company to add another $1.4 billion over the 4-year agreement to bring it up to $3.2 billion and $4.2 billion over 5 years. Now, those are all numbers, and you can, it's really hard to, I guess, judge how difficult that was. But every time the company had, a sort of deadline that they thought they were going to get we were going to get a release, they would put, maybe $250 million on the table, maybe $75 million on the table, but it was basically pulling teeth to get them to do it. At the end of the time, after we had gone through our bargaining in DC, and then we ended up going to Phoenix, we were able to get enough to get this deal done. I can tell you, based on having bargained a lot, I know there's other stuff that your committee wanted, that everyone wanted, but at the end of negotiations, you're really fighting to get, every penny out of the company. And I can tell you, based on, interacting with the company and the mediation board and the White House, that the company did put every penny that they could be forced to put on the table. And to me, that's the true judge of success in negotiations. Did you force your adversary to put in all that could be won? And here, I think that's the case. We're going to do a little bit more high-level overview of the increases. I'm going to flip it back to Dan for the next couple of slides.
Thanks, Joe. So at the core of the contract is your pay scale. It's the most valuable and most important thing to flight attendants, aside from the work rules and benefits that you get from the company. The pay scale, again, is going to increase 33 to 36% across each scale. It's not what's going to be provided to each flight attendant. As you'll see, as you walk through the steps, you get more money than what's in the scale and a years of service. The immediate increases, as you'll see, range from 18% to 20.5%. And what we call the out year scale is that it will increase after the first year of the effective contract by 2.75%, in the third year by 3%, the fourth year by 3%, and in the fifth year by 3.5%. And I think Joe can talk to you about what was involved in getting that 3.5%, the biggest pay increase in the out years for the fifth year. Boarding pay, again, a new component, adds roughly about 8% to that 33 and 36%, which brings the overall pay increase effectively to 41 and 44% over 5 years. And again, that's across the scales. It's not as someone moves through the scales. As we'll see, moving through the scales provides a much higher multiplier than just the boarding pay plus wages in each step. 401k increased from 5.5% with a mix of matches and direct contributions to 9%, which again is above other carriers. We're now sort of at the industry standard, if not leading in some cases, adding another 3.5% in benefit to the flight attendants. The per diem increases of 27% at the date of signing matches the pilots. So if you look at the pilots contract, they got 285 domestic, 340 international, and we increase those numbers each year by a nickel in the out years. And profit sharing is now standardized from what we used to have as 5% to a new mix of 10% for the company earnings below 2.5 billion and 20% contribution from the company for earnings above 2.5 billion of pre-tax profits. It's the same as the pilots, same as the mechanics, and same as the agents. So we've now got a contract that looks a lot like the industry, if not beating the industry, and is caught up to the pilots and other groups at American in terms of profit sharing and per diem. This slide is an attempt to try and quantify in terms of pocket money, in terms of the pay rate equivalent of each one of these components. The average wage goes up about 20% from that mix of 18 to 20.5. Since so many of you are at top of scale, it's weighted heavily toward the top. So the rough increase over the first year, if the TA is signed into a contract, would be a 20% increase for each one of you on average for wages. So if you take a look at boarding pay, the average boarding pay, according to the modeling that we've done with the company and other carriers have done, is around 8.2%. So that's an 8.2% increase on top of the 20% wage increase on average for flight attendants in this TA. Combining that with 401k money, boarding pay and wages all flow into 401k. So not only has the value of 401k at the current breakdown of 401k increased, it's increased because it's gone to 9% from 5.5% total contributions. The per diem, again, matching the pilots and going a nickel in the out years. The first year is a 2.5% increase relative to the pay scale. And all of the other things that we've gotten, including sit rig, which you'll hear about, and some other advances in compensation that are beneficial for the flight attendants, adds about another 1.1%. So if you take all of the things that are listed on this page and look at them at the end of this year, 35.9% increase over what your compensation is today. So that's the sort of snapshot of where we get to at the end of year one, 35.9% increase over today's compensation items. This slide, I think, represents something that's pretty important. It compares the values that were negotiated in various contracts over the years at LAA, which is American Airlines before the merger, and LUS, which is US Airways before the merger. You can see on the left-hand side that the contracts that were negotiated in the 90s for both American and US Airways, over the length of the contract, from one side to the other, starting date to the amendable date, was 17% for American and 15.6% for US Airways. Moving forward into the next round, just before 9/11, US Airways negotiated a contract that had 28.9% total increase in the scale. American, you guys negotiated a 25.7% increase in 2001, just before 9/11. The period between 2001 and 2013 was obviously the RPA, a couple of bankruptcies at US Airways, a bankruptcy at American. Coming out of that, US Airways was able to negotiate a 12.8%, and the JCBA was between 18.1 and 21.7. When you look at the far side, that shows the range of increases to the scale in this TA. The left-hand side is now the minimum at 33%, plus boarding pay adds up to 41%. The right-hand side equals the top out of the most value in each scale, each step, 36%, plus about 8% in boarding pay, which is about a 44% increase. And you can see how far above the previous negotiated contracts we are with this TA. So I think it represents all of the leverage, all of the bargaining power, all of your engagement, all of the strike threat to get that amount of money in this contract versus all of the efforts that had gone before this. This is the most valuable increase.
Okay, Dan, I'll jump in now.
Okay.
Okay, and I think it's worth noting too that, you know, when you look back at the big increases in the past, the ones in the, 2000 and 2001, those were won with the strike threat, just as this contract was won. Those were ones that the flight attendants groups were released into a 30-day cooling off period. I think at LUS it went up to midnight, and at LAA it said a little bit earlier, but both of them, that was because of the strike threat, which is the same as here. Just to go to the next slide, which is the wages. On all of this, you all can look at, more in detail in sort of the written material on the website, so I'm not going to spend a bunch of time on here. We'll note that, we were able to negotiate increases on date of signing between 18 and 20.5%. One of the questions is, why are they a little bit different? And that's because when we were negotiating, we looked at where the industry was on these wage rates. And what did it take to get us above Southwest? And it turns out that the Southwest flight attendants receive relatively less in the lower steps. So it required less of an increase to get above them and get to the top of the industry. We can move on to the next slide. What we've done here is we've added in, just so people can see sort of the economic impact of 8.2% average on top of your block rates. So that would be on the slide on the right with the green. Now, it's important to know that this is an average, and we'll talk a little bit below about how you can look at the calculator to figure out, exactly how it would impact your pay steps. But we think it's important, especially in the context of that you're putting a portion of the, total compensation into boarding pay to have that reflected here. Next we're going to talk a little bit about the weighted average of the flight attendant pay scale. Yeah, go ahead.
Hang on one second. I'm going to go back one slide. I think the deck you have that I sent you, it was a little out of order. So I want Dan to talk about the slide that's in between these two. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, sure. If you think back to what I've been talking about in terms of the scale increases, if you go across the second-year scale increase or go across the sixth-year scale increase, you will see that the increases there are static. They're for the fifth-year person. Now, nobody remains in the fifth year or the seventh year or the second year. You step through the scale on your anniversary date. So what we've done here is to try and show that you're going to get more income than is represented by what's in the scale as an increase. So it's not 33 to 36%. For example, someone in the second year, within the first year of the date of signing, you'll be making $40.40 as opposed to the current pay of $32.18. That's an 18% increase. Plus the step increase which provides you another probably 5 to 10%. Each and every year, that moves from the second year to the third year to the fourth year. And if you follow that green horizontal or diagonal stripe down, you'll see that at the end of the seventh year of someone who's in the second year now, after that 5-year period, your pay will increase by 108% on the book rate. And that'll feed into the 401k. That'll feed into your boarding pay, because boarding pay is a function of the pay rate. So you'll benefit more than just the scale increases. Someone in their fifth year, currently at 4016, will get paid 5367 in their sixth year and move again to the 10th year, in which case they'll make 83%. So this is just a few examples to show you that when you look at the pay charts and see that it's 33 to 36%, that's not what you're making. You're going to be making these horizontal stripes across in the green on these slides. And you can do the math, pick your number on the pay scale and look 5 years out, and that's going to be the number in the TA with those out year increases. So I think it's important to comprehend the value in that way for individual flight attendants. Joe's already talked about that slide. So I think it's important to know that, and we'll talk about this in more detail when we get to the TFP slides with Southwest and how they get paid and how Alaska gets paid. But essentially, when you do comparisons of other carriers, their pay rates, their benefits, their work rules, normally what's done is you apply their pay or their work rules or their schedule on your network and operation. And that's because we don't know their network and operation in enough detail to compare what it would cost or what would benefit flight attendants if we had Southwest pay or Delta's pay, because we don't work at Delta or Southwest, we work at American. And so if you take the demographics, that is how many flight attendants reside in each step of the pay scale, and apply Southwest and Alaska, their TA and Delta, these are the numbers that pop out when you look at the weighted average demographic, operationally American pay rates. And you'll see that we come out with boarding pay and the pay rate weighted to American demographics about a dime above the average Southwest pay if it were paid at American. The same thing with Alaska. We come out about 31 cents above the average scale pay for Alaska flight attendants in their TA in the first year, if you weighted it by Americans' demographics and operation. So the new number seems in my head to have jumped from something in the high 50s as a weighted average to something in the $73 an hour average for the carriers that have just negotiated their most recent contracts. Alaska's got a TA, Southwest has got a CBA, and we've got a TA. This is going to help United flight attendants move from $55.65 to somewhere in the mix of the $73 an hour average. And so it's important to understand that we're part of a pattern of bargaining in the industry. When we get a raise, it helps all the other flight attendants argue and bargain for raises. Southwest's newest contract helped us get these pay rates. Alaska's highest contract and our contract and Southwest is going to help United. So we can proclaim that with our new contract at our system, with our demographics, we have the highest average pay rate plus boarding pay in the industry currently with the TA. So if you look again at sort of what I would consider external and internal comparisons, external being what are other flight attendants getting in the industry, internal being what are other American groups getting. We've got some comparisons here in that the first year, our pay rate increase, including boarding pay, is somewhere between 26% and 28.5%. And that's just adding 8% onto the 18 to 20%, 20.5% increase in the base scale. Southwest flight attendants don't have boarding pay. And we'll talk about the reasons why they don't have boarding pay, because it has to do with the differences in our network and the average number of boardings that Southwest flight attendants do versus the rest of the industry. They got a 22% increase in pay, which supposedly incorporates boarding pay for them. We have plus boarding pay. So you have to look at it in context of their rates versus our rates plus boarding pay. The American Airlines pilots, after their years-long negotiations, ended up with a 21% on average increase over the first year. When you look at, again, the total increases to the pay scale over the agreement, which includes our base pay, plus the out years, plus the 8.2% average boarding pay, we end up at about 38.5 to 41%. Pilots end up with a 37% increase. Again, this is to the scale. Southwest flight attendants end up with a 31% overall increase. So on both the internal evaluation of what did the pilots get versus what we got, as well as the external evaluation as to what Southwest flight attendants got versus what we got, we beat both groups on a short-term first year and overall for the 5 years.
Joe, do you want to add anything in?
No, I think that's good.
Okay.
Okay. We'll move on.
So
All right.
we had a pretty big battle with the company on the assessment of how much flight attendants at other carriers get paid. One of the problems in the industry is we've got two larger carriers that have flight attendants being paid according to something that no other flight attendant groups get paid by, which is a thing called TFP. Now, a TFP is something that Herb Kelleher invented, which is a distance-based measure, which is the distance from Dallas Love Field to Houston Hobby on an air route basis, which is 243 miles. So one TFP at Southwest or at Alaska is equal to one amount of pay unit. So if you look at their pay scales, they look different because they're paid in TFPs and not block hours. And so when you're trying to compare how do we get paid versus how Alaska and Southwest get paid, you have to take account, not only do they get paid in TFPs, but the conversion from TFPs to block hours is dependent on the route network of each carrier. So for example, you'll see that the block hour pay rate for Southwest is multiplying TFPs by what's in red there, 1.164 TFPs per hour, which is effectively driven by the fact that they've got an inefficient route system and they've got a shorter haul than most other carriers, 750 miles. That determines at Southwest what the ratio of block hours to TFP should be.
Yeah,
Alaska.
Dan, let me
go
ahead. Jump in here a second.
Sure.
So I just want to kind of break this down real quickly, and then we can kind of maybe move on. But
okay.
Here's the deal. Southwest flight attendants get paid in distance. They don't get paid in block hour. So when people say like, oh, Southwest flight attendants are making 90 block, they really aren't, because they actually get paid in TFPs and they get paid based on time. And because what Dan's telling you is the system that they have pays you more for shorter flights. Well, guess what? Southwest has a lot of shorter flights, but the rest of the industry doesn't. American, United, even Alaska, all have a average flight length that's 1,100 to 1,500. So it's almost twice as much as, or 1.25 more than Southwest. So the bottom line is, if we took Southwest TFP and applied it at American, guess what? You'd be making about 84 block or so without boarding pay, because they'd be using a lower conversion rate. Likewise, if you took our pay scale and you applied it to the Southwest, well, guess what? They'd be making about 95 block, because as Dan pointed out, they have way, way, way more boardings. And if they had gotten boarding pay, which is in our agreement, they'd be making a lot more. But I think the key point here is, and we can go into the next slide, is that we're not in competition with the unions. We're in competition with management. And I think that's important to keep in mind, that all of us were able to use each other's contracts to kind of piggyback bargain and to get higher than we otherwise would. So I think it was helpful for us that the Southwest flight attendants got where they got. And likewise, I think us and Alaska were both at the mediation board at the same time, and that was helpful as well. We're all converging in the high 80s combined with boarding pay. And then, one thing to keep in mind is that at the end of negotiations, everyone chooses how they're going to divide up the money. You could put a little bit more into wages, or you could put it into work rules, sit rig, vacation, and so forth. And all of that gets costed against the agreement. I think the committee here chose to get the wages where they were, but also chose to get some work rules, because work rules matter. You know, so I think finally, as we talk about in the slide, we need to have a union approach to this, that, you know, we need to respect the fact that all the unions negotiate kind of based on their needs of their flight attendants. Southwest flight attendants have a lot shorter flights. So it's good that they negotiate a wage rate and a TFP that pays more for those flights, because it wouldn't, even if it wouldn't work for us, it works for them. But, you know, I think we're at a place where if we look at our overall compensation, look at our wages, look at our work rules, which are some of the best work rules in the industry that we're able to pursue. You know, I truly believe that this is an industry leading agreement. Dan, you want to just real quickly go over the other economic components?
Sure. As you'll notice, the company, as Julie discussed and Joe discussed, wanted to give us some token signing bonus that was very small and looked more like the agents than it does like the pilots or other larger work groups. So we were able to bargain up until the last minute to allocate as much money as we possibly could, over $500 million in retroactive pay back to the signing or amendable date of the contract. We've got a new pilot-like pay system for actual sit time in excess of 2 hours and 30 minutes, and we'll go through that. It's the same as the pilots. All vacation days are going to be paid at $4 per day, regardless of length. Credit is still going to be at $330 for less than 7-day blocks. We're going to be double paid, increase our pay by double from 75 to 150. And the retirement reimbursement is paid at 50% of our wage rate. And we've got improvements to the narrow body lead and IPD galley increases.
Yeah, and just real briefly, you know, when we bargain, all of these items get values attached to them. And when we're at the end of bargaining, they all got put in there. We're bargaining to get them, we're bargaining to get wages, we're kind of making calculations, your committee, on what the proper mix is. The company doesn't, you know, at some point, you know, mainly cares about total cost. So that was, they're going to be concerned about that, and that's one of the fights that we have. Okay, so then we've got the 401k. Just real briefly, we've already touched on this. You know, our current 401k and direct contribution is insufficient, as you can see. It's the 3% and then the 2.5% match. We were able to increase that from 5%, from the 5.5% to 9%. So that's 3.5%. The way we think about this is it's just deferred compensation. So it's basically, it's taking, you know, what would otherwise be, you know, roughly a 3.5% wage increase and funding that for people's retirement. As you can see from the slide, there's somewhat of a convergence there as well with you know, with the 8 and 9%. Southwest is a little bit higher, but theirs is all of a match. So I think we feel pretty good about being able to go from the bottom of the industry up towards one of the better ones. And then the profit sharing, I think Dan's already mentioned this. We basically switched to the formula that the rest of the company is going to, which matches the Delta profit sharing. Although, of course, American doesn't have the profitability, but hopefully this will have the greater value in the future. You want to say anything more about either of those, Dan?
No, I think, you know, it's now with the rest of the internal groups of pilots, mechanics, and it also matches non-union Delta for their employees. United's got probably a worse program because it has to beat the prior year's pre-tax margin, which means you got to keep increasing your profits to get the money that United has. So we've got the industry's best profit sharing program, I'd argue, right now.
Okay, then we're on to retro-pay. Do you want us to cover retro-pay, Julie, or?
No, you know, before we move on, I've got a couple questions. I think the committee's got the rest of this, but I think for Dan and Joe, I've got a couple questions that I think the flight attendants would like to hear from you. Dan, we have a question from a flight attendant that says, can you explain COLA and why it does or does not apply in this TA? Are you able to answer that?
Yeah, sure. COLA is sort of an age-old union issue that represents a cost of living adjustment. Government programs like Social Security sometimes get COLAs. And what it is it's a measure of whatever you're getting paid, whatever that income or benefit is, multiplied by whatever increase in cost you're facing. Either, from a measure like the Bureau of Transportation Statistics, which keeps track of what we call inflation. So it's a measure to adjust pay according to the prevalent inflation. It was in favor back in the 70s when we had inflation close to 15-20%. It's fallen out of favor for the last, I would say, 20 or 30 years. I really don't know of any contracts right now that have COLA in them for flight attendants especially. And what we're trying to do is with this contract is you'll see 30, 35, 40% increases in certain things like your pay and boarding pay are going to more than offset the increases that we expect to happen in the future. So we've inbuilt essentially a COLA through the out-year wage increases and improvements to per diem into this contract without actually calling it a COLA.
Yeah, man, if
Thank
I
you,
can add
Dan.
a little bit there.
Sure.
Let me just add a little bit there. So our date of signing increases plus the boarding pay outstrip inflation over the last period since our last increase under the last contract. And the other good thing is going forward, when you look at out-year increases a while back, a lot of those were like 1% and 1.5%, which were not sufficient. But looking at our out-year increases, which are 2.75, 3, and 3.5, those are projected to be higher than the projected increase in inflation. Which is, due to the monetary policy of the government being driving down inflation. So I think if the question is, how does this stack up to sort of the inflationary trends? I think we're confident that it beats inflation both on date of signing and in the out years.
Thank you, guys. I'm glad we have 3 hours today. We've gone through an hour and we got quite a few more slides to go, but I got 2 more questions while you're here. Joe, I think this is more you. We've got this flight attendant is asking, why do we give up on cost of living adjustments after the amendable date? Like a lot of flight attendants, especially because this has been a 5-year stretch without a pay raise, right, are really concerned about this happening again. Obviously, COVID really put us behind. The average for flight attendant contracts is between 2 and 3 years. We got this done in 3 years once we got back to the table. But there is a lot of concern because of what we just, went through. So do you want to add anything into that, Joe?
Yeah, it's just one of those things that it gets negotiated. Employers usually fight against having increases outside the term of the agreement where they're costed against. I think we had in our early proposals, we had that on the table. But I think, I think how we view it is, and I think what we learned in this bargaining, especially when we did our reset is, we need to have targeted negotiations and rely on the strike threat and bring things to a head a lot quicker. And these sort of, prolonged negotiations is something that we need to work against because it benefits management. So I think that's the whole point of us taking like an early strike vote and all that we did to push the process forward. But yeah, I mean, it certainly would be nice to have increases after the amendable date, but that's not something we were able in this contract to get the employer to agree to, nor is it something that is standard in the industry.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Okay, I think it's really important for me to talk about right now, and Joe, you can probably add in with this also, as far as our implementation timeline. This definitely, we knew that our flight attendants did not want to see in our implementation schedule this time any words that did not have dates in them. And I'm not going to even mention those 3 letters because I don't like to repeat them. They do not see the implementation timeline yet because we are still currently making sure and going through it. And, you know, before it's signed, I'm really want to be as thorough as possible. We do have a couple of items that when we were negotiating, that do have a timeline that is already there, and they are 2 big items. And I think we need to explain to the flight attendants why, and let them know. I know leadership knows, and contract action. I know our flight attendants know that our boarding pay is not going to come on date of signing. It does have a 6-month implementation. And we did learn from JCBA that, these items require programming, and they do not start programming until the agreement is ratified. And so from history, we wanted to make sure we captured the value of the time frame it takes to get something programmed and put that elsewhere into our contract, such as wages. And so boarding pay does have a 6-month implementation. We have a firm date to get that implemented, but that will not be on data signing. We also have SITRIG, which also has a 6-month, same reason. The programming is going to take a little while on that, even though, as everyone knows, the pilots have that. It still takes time to add it into our contract. So the entire implementation schedule does have dates. We will not see what we saw in the last one for those of you that were here. And that will be out, and we will put that on the website most likely by the end of this week so everyone can view it. But we heard you loud and clear that it was really, really important that what happened to us with JCBA did not happen in these negotiations. And so we do have dates in this implementation schedule, and we will make sure to get that to you this week. Joe, do you want to add anything else about implementation?
Yeah, I mean, just on the boarding pay, when you add up 27,000 flight attendants and then, how many boardings per month, I don't know what the average would be, but you're up into the hundreds of thousands of transactions in each month that will have to be paid. And that's not going to be done in a manual process. And I know people may say, oh, it should be done manually, but it's not going to happen. It's just, maybe if you had a carrier that had, 1,000 flight attendants or 500 flight attendants, you might be able to get that done. But this is something that has to be programmed. And we know from history that developing these sort of programs doesn't happen right away. But I think one of the things that was important to us is, and I think we saw that, maybe in previous negotiations, is that we wanted to make sure that we captured the value of any delay in, not even delay, but any time that it took to program these items. So when we have a 6-month implementation for the boarding pay, then when we're negotiating and we're costing out the agreement, we have a credit there. And that's one of the ways that we use to fund not only higher wages, but items like SITRIG, which in the long run, those items keep on ticking. So the money from the delay, or not even delay, but from the timing of the implementation, that's a one-time delay. But when we're able to use that money and apply it to get ongoing contract provisions that are going to go from years and even decades into the future, then at least in that part, that's a good thing. So I think Julie said that they're finalizing the language on the timeline, and you will see that language along with the full text of the whole agreement before voting starts.
Okay, that full text of the whole agreement is already out there, except for the implementation timeline and the ratification bonus and definitions, right? We've got
Okay.
everything else out there for our flight attendants today. I will say also, so the new wages go in October 1st if this is ratified on September 12th. And from the last contract, it took us 6 months to get all of the economic items implemented. That I can tell you because I was there. That was the focus to get those in, but it took us 6 months to get all of the items in and programmed. And then, as some of you know, the rest of the implementation took a little bit longer. But thanks, Joe. I just wanted to get that out there and make sure everybody is aware of that. One last thing before you leave, because I see we've got quite a few of these and I hate to even bring it up, but I'm going to bring it up because this is about providing information. And this is, and Joe, you and I've talked about this quite a bit. I hate to say quite a bit, but we've gone through it. If this is not ratified on that date, what does it look like? How does it work? And I know, first thing we're going to do is we're going to survey the membership, right? We're going to find out what we need to do. But do you want to walk them through kind of what happens next, Joe?
Yeah, and look, I mean, I'm a big believer in, the members, you all the ones who are decide you're going to live under the contract, so you're going to decide whether to ratify it or not. So this is merely providing information, and because I've been doing this for 30 years. But basically, typically when an agreement doesn't ratify, then you have to have a process to figure out why didn't it ratify and what are the concerns. So you typically survey the membership. The committee will have to meet, kind of figure out what are the key issues. And it's important to know, like, just because you don't like one particular provision, that's not necessarily why the agreement overall didn't ratify. But so you have that process. Then the committee needs to get together and formulate a new set of demands. And usually you tend to go in there with a limited number of items because you don't want to go back into another, 3-4 year negotiations, because that just benefits management. So you have hopefully a limited number of items. And then we're in mediation, so we would have to approach the National Mediation Board and ask them to schedule dates. And then, they would have to kind of weigh in about, how they wanted to deal with it in terms of scheduling. I mean, typically it's probably, I think 6 months is a fair guess about when you could get back to the table. Maybe you could speed it up if you speed up some of the elements, and part of it depends on the mediation board's availability. And then I think that this is more kind of in the line of, based on experience, but once you get back to the table, just because you said no doesn't mean that, the sort of bargaining conditions have changed, right? The company, and this is typical of American Airlines in particular, because I've dealt with them on, sort of the U.S. Airways TA1, TA2. American Airlines typically takes the position that they're not going to put additional money into the agreement. And then, you can fight them out, but then it becomes at times, they want you to basically kind of move money around and figure out a more palatable way of redistributing the same amount of money. Here, we're in the context of a little bit different, because we've kind of restored at least partially the right to strike, which wasn't in the case in these merger negotiations. It wasn't a factor. But here we'd have to say, okay, well then, how do we generate some additional pressure with the mediation board and all of that to kind of get that back on the table and get some added leverage to get the company to move. I would say that, if you were trying to both get back to the table and significantly, increase the amount the company was willing to put in there, you would have to look for a pretty tough and pretty long fight, because, I figure it took us probably about over a year, right, from when we got into hardcore into the economics, to finally beat the company into submission and get this agreement. So I think you would have a pretty big fight to be able to get that ahead. So that's basically the process. There's a lot of unknowns here, but I guess in closing, I'll say, don't assume just because you vote that the company is sitting there with more money in their pocket, ready to put it on the table, because I'm pretty sure that's not the case with this company, because they were not happy about how much money they had to put into this agreement. Every time they had to make another move, they were forced by the strike thread and the government and the mediation board to make another offer. They were not happy. So I think they're probably tapped out, but that's just I think our analysis.
Thanks, Joe. Thank you, Joe and Dan. I really appreciate you guys being on today. I think it's very helpful. You have a lot of experience in the industry. I know Dan's been working with APFA for about 30 years, and Joe has been working with us and knows our contract probably better than a lot of people. When I say that, I mean, and that's why he's our negotiating attorney. He knows this contract well. I've called on him many times over the last 10 years to come in and help us out when we got into these big fights with the company, and he's been very helpful throughout these negotiations. We couldn't have done it without you, and we really, really appreciate all that you've done. You two do not have to stay on for the rest of the call. The committee has it from here, and we will see you tomorrow in Chicago. So thank you so much. Really, really appreciate your time today, both of you.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to retro pay, and this is the breakdown in 2020 from January through December 31st. You will get 3% on your eligible earnings. 2021, 4%. I think you guys can see it here. 2022, 4%. 2023, 10.8%. And 2024 up until August 31st paycheck. So your earnings up until August 31st. That doesn't include the month of August that you're working, because that pay you would see in September. Okay, so July is your last month, your working month, that will be in this retro check. So in order to be eligible for the retro check, you need to be on the system seniority list on the effective date of ratification. Okay, if it is passed on, if it's voted in on September 12th, that would be that date. Subject to the terms and conditions of the JCBA at any point during the relevant period. That means that you are a working flight attendant during that time frame from 2020 to 2024. Does it mean that you have to be a working flight attendant the entire time? No. If you possibly might be doing another job, such as, let's say, an FSM, or you're working in training, then the time frame that you were a flight attendant would qualify you for retro pay in that time frame. But you also have to still be on the system seniority list. There's one more qualifier. You have to remain employed as a flight attendant with American on the date of the payment of the one-time retroactive pay, ratification bonus. And that is going to be 60 days from date of ratification. Okay. The tax for this, we've gotten tons of questions about this. It is a flat rate of 22% per the IRS. Okay. One check. You're going to get that one check 60 days after ratification. I think I went one slide. Oh, sorry, I went the wrong way. One too far the wrong way. Yeah, is that the right slide, Tim? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So she already covered a little bit about the eligible earnings. Again, this is for your earnings that were paid during those time periods. So anything that was paid in the year of 2020, 21, 22, 23, and anything paid through August 31st. So that means paid through your August 31st check. There's an important distinction because it's not when it's earned, it's when it's paid. So everybody's got that clear. What's ineligible, per diem, incentives, employee recognition, things like that. So that's on there. And also we did put a retro pay calculator on the APFA website. If you haven't already visited the website, please go there to the TA page. There's a lot of really good information. There's a retro pay calculator, a sequence pay calculator, so you can see the difference. But important to know that that calculator, it's really to provide you an estimate. We want to make sure that you know that when you're using this calculator, we are estimating, I mean, you're estimating your own calculation. If we can go to the next slide, you're going to need to gather your end of the year pay statements from the website on JetNet. So you can go to the ePays, wherever it's called now, pull down each year, 2021, 22, 23, 24, and pull that end of December check. Once you have that check, you'll go down, you'll look for the earnings after advance line, which is about halfway down on the left-hand side of your pay statement. There, you're going to see the total for the year. That is the number that you're going to enter into the fields on the calculator on the website. If we can go to the next slide. So you're going to do that for each of those years. Now, when you get to August, obviously we haven't ended the month of August. So you can either enter how much you've earned to date, which was just in your ePay statement this last few days, or you could estimate it based on what you've earned for this year. But remember, it's just for the first 8 months of 2024. Once you put those earnings in, it is going to generate the estimate of your payout. So hopefully everybody's done that by now and are happy with the results.
Okay. All right. And all of this is on the APFA website at apfa.org. All right. And the next slide is our wages. And I think you've seen this a few times already, just in case you wanted to see it again. Here are our wages for the next data signing plus the next 4 years. 5 years. All right.
Next, boarding pay. So we're very pleased to have secured boarding pay as part of this agreement. This is something that we heard about for years from flight attendants and was one of the priorities identified by the membership, as well as the base presidents for being addressed during these negotiations. So going forward, if this is ratified, what you'll see is now a boarding pay premium for each boarding that is done. It's paid at the rate of 50% of your hourly rate of pay. For the scheduled boarding times, that would be the times that are in the contract, the times that the passengers see, the times that we know today. It's broken down in the chart for your convenience by 30-minute boarding, 35-minute boarding, 45-minute boarding, and 50-minute boarding at your step of pay. It's important to know that this boarding time is always going to be paid the same amount. It's always going to be paid at 30 minutes for a 30-minute boarding. If you show up late, there's no adjustment because you're late. It doesn't get you out of boarding pay. We've heard that from a few things. If you board in less than 30 minutes, it's still 30 minutes that's paid for the boarding time. If it takes a little longer, it's still paid 30 minutes. So that does not adjust the payment of the boarding pay. We also did see, this is very much close to what Delta Delta was given. However, we have a little bit of difference. We are paid for every boarding. So if you board an aircraft, you end up, the aircraft goes out of service and then you have to board another aircraft, we do get boarding for that boarding pay for that second boarding as well. Next slide.
And the good news on this is that your boarding pay continues to increase.
Continues to increase, exactly. So we did have some feedback about why isn't it paid the same rate for everybody? But if you think about it, if it would have been a flat rate, that flat rate would stay for the life of the contract. Plus, this is one of the most, stressful parts of our job. And if we're going to go down that route that everybody should be paid the same, then, I apply that for the rest of the time. So no, it's paid at half your hourly rate of pay. But remember, when you're looking at this chart, there's a column that says hourly boarding rate. That's for a 1 hour boarding time. When you go to the right through the chart, you'll see it's broken down half of that hourly rate would be what that is for the 30-minute boarding and so on.
Thank you, Tim. Sally?
Okay, so for our next slide, we have position pay and the improvements that we were able to secure with that. We were able to bring up the 319, 320, and 737 up to 325, both on the domestic and the international side. We also were able to go ahead and get the 321 grabbed in there. No, it's not on property yet, but at least now we'll know what we're going to get paid prior to bidding. And just as another little add-on, if you are a non-purser and you fly in a purser role, which means you are on a 3-class service, you will now get the purser pay. We were also able to double galley pay for IPD.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you.
Also, can we go back to boarding for one last thing? This is very important for our reserves that I did not state, is that boarding pay is paid on top of guarantee. So any boardings that you perform on your reserve month does go above guarantee. It doesn't measure against anything as well for line holders or reserves. This is additional compensation that we're negotiated and secured that is paid for something we're already doing today.
And we have some great examples of that later. All right. Wendy?
For holiday pay, one of the issues we see with the language that we have currently today is that you are scheduled to start your sequence on the holiday, but because of a delay, you end up not operating that leg on the holiday. And we were having to fight for that pay. So now it is added into the language that if you are rescheduled, delayed, or and that was originally scheduled to touch, and then it doesn't, it will still apply to the holiday pay or incentive pay. And just to point out, we do have 9 days that are designated as holidays, and the company has the option to add any incentive day that they wish.
Thank you.
Compensation for hotel delays. This is something new for us. As you know, flight attendants have had a lot of experience waiting on hold for hours with crew schedule, crew tracking, trying to get through, waiting for hotel assignments after there's been a reschedule or cancellation. We wanted to secure something that would at least provide compensation for flight attendants because our time is valuable. I mean, the company's time is valuable, but so is ours, definitely. And this will do that in these instances where you've experienced a reschedule, cancellation, or other scheduling change, and you haven't been assigned a hotel. So if you experience one of those things, rescheduling, cancellation, or other scheduling change, and you fulfilled any scheduling obligation that you had during that time, right? You still have to do that. If there's a 3-hour, 4-hour, which you still have to satisfy that. But from 1 hour, the later of 1 hour after actual block-in at the gate, or after you've 1 hour from when that modification has occurred and you've satisfied the obligation, you will be paid 150% for the duty period at 100% credit if they have not given you a hotel assignment, right? If it ends up going to be 3 hours, then you're going to be paid 150% for the entire sequence. So this is something that's very good. It should hopefully force the company to do a little bit better with what they're doing. But if they don't, this is additional compensation for us if that occurs.
Okay, I hate to bring this up, but what if I'm going to book my own hotel because I can't get through, right? Does this apply to me?
So the good news is that this does not preclude you, it doesn't prevent you from securing the hotel on your own, either using the contractual language where you would go out and secure your own and submit for reimbursement, or if you choose to use Biz Hero, that would be your option. You could still do that, but it does not prevent you from getting this hotel penalty pay as well.
Thanks, Tim. Susan?
Great. Vacation pay and credit. All vacation days will now be paid at 4 hours. The credit remains the same. So the credit for vacation blocks less than 6 or less days will be 3.5 and still 4 for 4 days. This is great for people using vacation for FMLA, where you would bust a block of 7 and reduce the pay. Now the pay is going to be all the same. Same for requesting additional time for bereavement or filler days. And also great for reserve, the extra 30 minutes that they have on a vacation that's 6 days or less was paid above their guarantee.
Thank you, Susan. Okay, we're gonna move into work rules. And this slide says a lot. Work rules really matter. We all know that here. And I will tell you, when you're negotiating a contract, you realize how important those work rules are, especially when the company wants to take them. So on this slide, these are the work rules that we protected. And we protected some of these till the very end. And Joe spoke of it earlier, but we got to the point where we said 100%, absolutely no way are we going to get a deal with those concessions. And finally, at the end, those came off. I'll walk through some of these. You can see the long list that we have here. I think we actually have a few more that we probably haven't added to it. But you all know about those transition days that they wanted to go into your line holder month, reserve days into the line holder month. I think everybody helped chant it out and finally get rid of it at all the pickets, because that we heard that chant quite a bit. Our 14-hour IPD rest, they wanted to reduce to 10 hours in actual operation. Same as what happens with the pilots today. This was so important to us. There was no way we were going to allow that to happen. We need the 14 hours of rest after those flights, and there is no way that we could allow that to be reduced to 10 hours. Our rescheduling basic rules. Okay, when we talk about rescheduling, one of the basic rules in rescheduling is that if there are reserves available, they need to assign reserves to a trip before they reschedule a line holder, unless it's to prevent a delay or cancellation. This is in quite a few of our rescheduling rules, and this was very hard fought, and I'm so happy to say we won. This is a major change to our rescheduling section. There are quite a few other carriers that do not have this. I'm not sure any of them do, but there are quite a few that do not. And we are very happy to say we've saved this. We protected our last sequence rescheduling language, meaning that after you have a last sequence, last series, and you're on that trip, they can only reschedule you after origination, and that remains the same. Maintain our 10J7. I think most of you know what 10J7 is. That means that they need to get you back to the crew base by the time you were originally scheduled to get back. And they have to make every attempt to do that today. If they cannot, because there are no flights, there is no way. That's one reason why not. But this is programmed into the rescheduling language. And this is something that we know our flight attendants really appreciate. Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, and if anybody's just coming in, tuning in, like after this started, just to be clear, this list represents things that the company wanted to do that we did not agree to, but there's also some things in here that we kept. So when it says work rules protected, you see the first thing, 5 reserve transition days, that's something the company wanted to implement. We did not agree. But then when you look down and say we protected something, that we already own that. So it's we need to probably relabel this, but we'll do that.
Okay, I explained it, but I know Tim, I know.
My heart just said. My heart just
It's
said.
fine, Tim. I think I explained what they wanted. I think probably every flight attendant on the property here knows what they wanted to do with these transition days. I'll go through the rest of these really quick. They wanted to not allow reserves to drop trips in ETB. That didn't change. They wanted to change the time frame on the front end of reserves picking up. They were not able to get that. We'll get more into that later. They wanted to increase at the end of your wrap. You know how you have that 2 hours at the end of your wrap and your standby assignments to 2 hours? They want to increase that to 3 hours for the co-terminal basis. That did not happen. 10J8. They wanted to exclude standbys. Well, if they exclude standbys, pretty much 10J8 is pretty much gone because standbys help us out quite a bit with 10J8. This is a really big one, and I could cry over this one, sorry, but they wanted to remove the rescheduling language that does not allow them to defer flights and for you to have to stay on that flight. Today, if it's a deferred flight, the only way that you have to stay on it if there is no reserves available, or if the trip gets back by the time you were supposed to get back in base, right? And I know for a lot of our new hires, they don't know what we're talking about when we talk about deferred flights, thank goodness. But this is something that we had for a very long time. We were able to fight that off, and they did not get that. They wanted to remove the transportation to the co-terminals in LA. And they wanted to restrict grievances to only contractual and disciplinary issues only. That's it. No policy issues at all. So we're really happy that we were able to protect all of those and that they were not able to get the 5 days of transition and anything else they were trying to get. Tim, I know you're studying it, so I think that's the one. All right, let's move on to PBS.
So PBS, what you see on the screen are some of the improvements that we made to the properties for bidding. So we added a function where you can sort speaker sequences out separately. So you'll be able to see all the speaker sequences without having to go through the entire bid packet. Also prefer position order per aircraft. Today, if you're choosing separate aircraft in the same layer and a position, it's going to put that position with all those aircraft that you have in that same layer. This will allow you to bid the aircraft and position together. So you're not having to burn a whole layer to do that same thing. Generic double ups, this would be for those people who are adventurous and want to bid for as many double ups as they can throughout the month generically.
And we have a lot of those flight attendants.
I can't imagine, but
I know, but we do. Yeah.
And then the reserve ability to bid consecutive block of days. This is something we did hear from reserves that wanted, they just really wanted to fly on their days off. They didn't really care when the days off were, but in order to have to be able to pick up, because you have to be legal on both ends, right? For your wraps and everything, they needed a chunk of days off. So they wanted the ability to bid for the maximum amount of days off in a block, and they don't care where it is. Just give me a block of days so I can pick up. So we're happy to be able to do that. Oh, trip trading from negative days, right off the bat.
There you go.
So this is one of the improvements that we've secured in TTS. This is very important because today, as you know, if you put in for a trip to trade or to drop, a lot of times you'll get that message that says monthly OT limits exceeded, which means the daily limit or the monthly limit has been exceeded, and therefore your transaction has been denied or ignored. This trip trading for more negative days is an exception to those daily limits. So even though the daily limits have been met or are exceeded, subject to a few parameters, those trades will now be processed in a separate run, which is going to be immediately following the TTS run. So here's a chart. Now this chart is just for you to, it's just to illustrate what we're talking about here. They can't see me if I walk up there now. So
Go ahead.
So anyway, so if you look at the very top line, these are the daily open limits. This is set before the month starts, the same value every day across the board. For this example, we're using 25. So for the month, the daily limit is 25. So when you look at open time, if that open time is over the amount of the daily limit, nothing's going to trade or be able to be dropped because open time's already full. Today, this is today. So if you wanted to take your trip, trade it for another trip, and it's already over the limit, it's not going to go through. What this exception does is it says, okay, let's look at the trip you're trying to drop. In this example, I have a trip 8, 9, 10 of July. I want to trade that for a trip in open time that is the 10th, 11th, or 12th. So looking at this example, all of the days are over the limit. So today it would just be ignored. It wouldn't go through. But what this exception does, it says, okay, if you have a trip and you're trying to trade for a trip with open time, if coverage is worse on the day that you're picking up, meaning I'm helping the company by providing better coverage because where I'm dropping my trip, coverage is bad, but it's not as bad as what I'm trying to pick up. So I'm picking up a trip, the coverage is worse. Subject to those parameters, it will go through. This is good because this allows more movement in TTS. The other thing is that there's also the issue of reserves, how many reserves they have on hand. So today, you can be over the limit already. You could have plenty of reserves for that day. They know they're going to have plenty of reserves to cover the overtime, but those transactions are still denied today because it's not looking at how many reserves they have. It doesn't adjust. So this exception run will also help in those situations. So it's a good thing. It provides more flexibility for our fleet.
So Tim, I know that we have this trip overlapping. Trips don't have to overlap though.
They don't have to overlap.
The trades at the drop and the pickup, right? They cannot be touching each other, right, in order for it to go through.
Yeah, and basically your trip has to be the equal or the same amount of days or greater. They can't be touching a protective holiday. And then basically to make sure that its coverage is worse, you know, that you're trading for a more negative day, for example, that's where there's a parameter that has to be met. So
We need to see more trades happening.
yes, we
And
do.
this is what we negotiated to see that without adding more to that 3%. Because I hear all the time, are we going to increase that 3%? And I'm like, if we increase the 3%, that means we need more reserves because that means people can drop in, right? This is an exception that will help allow more trades without increasing the reserves.
And we've done other things to also increase the pool of people picking up.
All right, next slide, that's me.
So in UBL, today, once your trip is in UBL and you're trying to trade it, you can't. All you can do is position improve. We've secured the language where if I have a trip tomorrow that signs in at 6 a.m. and I want a trip that departs later and it's an open time, I can ballot for and be awarded that sequence in seniority order up until 3 home-based time the day prior. So it's possible that I would be able to trade that trip for a later sign-in. We also have less than minimum call out in UBL. We don't have this today. We do have it for today for aggressive reserves. So this is kind of something, it's short call out is what it used to be called. Flight attendants can ballot for sequences that come open within 2 or 3 hours if you're at a co-terminal 3 hours with a scheduled departure after that time. In-base line holders and reserves on days off would have first chance at that. And then out of base line holders and reserve days off would have a chance at that trip. So you can ballot for what your parameters are with less than minimum call out. Speaking of out of base, we will have out of base UBL. This will allow flight attendants to pick up time from other bases once in base line holders and reserves on days off have first chance at that. So you will be able to pick up, but once you do pick up an out of base trip, you will not be able to drop it or trade it. It is yours.
Thanks, Wendy. Oh, pay protection. This is me and Wendy. Okay. We have great pay protections, probably the best in the industry, if you ask me. And we've, with pay protection, we have a new item which we've worked through finally with the company. This has been probably an issue for quite a while. And this is if you pick up a trip on a day that is currently pay protected and you pick up a trip on ETB, you negate your pay protection that you had. So let's say that your trip originally that you're pay protected for gets in at 6 o'clock in the morning. You are blocked from picking up a trip on ETB today the entire day. That won't happen in the future. Now you can pick up a trip after the release of your pay protected trip, and you will not lose your pay protection for that trip. We also expanded the pay protections. We have a provision in our contract currently that I have signed many LOAs for in the last 4 years. And that is because it's kind of a complicated provision that just didn't work. It was a combination of 2 different contracts. And so we're really happy to say that now when we have like a natural disaster, I signed him for Miami. I believe I've signed him also for Dallas. when we have flight attendants who lose 3 or more sequences on their schedule, and you're not protected anywhere else in the JCBA, let's say last sequence, last series, then you will have the option now to protect that lost time by using the TTS like sequence process. So we're really happy we were able to get that.
So carryover changeover protection, this is part of a settlement of a presidential grievance, and it is added to the contract. So today I have my carryover sequence in August to September, but when bidding starts or there's a change from the carryover trip, and if that pay is less or the sequence changes, you are pay protected for what you originally bid for, which is we were fighting this constantly and now it's settled. So it's in the contract. Pay protection added for when flight attendant change their deadhead to from their first live leg and the flight is canceled or delayed. So I'm a commuter and I'm a Dallas-based flight attendant, but my first leg is a deadhead to Austin. And I want to be deadheaded from LA to Austin. They can do that and you change it. If that flight, my flight, that I chose to change my deadhead to is delayed or canceled, if I can't be in position for my first live leg, at the flight attendant's option, I can choose to be split onto that trip or offered other flying. If I do other flying or get split on, I will be pay protected for the trip. If I choose not to, I will lose pay protection. Reserves last sequence, last series. So we don't have this for reserves today, which is really good. So once you have completed your reserve obligation for the month, you can do pickup from TTS, UBL, or ETB. And if you are you have a cancellation, you will get pay protection for that last sequence you're basically become a line holder in essence. But you would receive last sequence, last series pay protection after completing your reserve obligation.
Okay, so for satellite bases, the top 2 bullet points are pretty substantive changes because currently what we have is that for satellite bases, it's really the company. They can do what they want for opening. And then for closing the satellite base, currently it's closed the program, not just one, but all of them. So we were able to secure improvements, huge improvements on that is that it's mutually agreeable now, and we're actually a stakeholder in it and at the table on making those decisions. We also have electronic notification for the satellite bases that will become available. That way, when sequences come available, the satellite base flyers will be able to see that a lot quicker. And that will also help alleviate the base coordinators when they're trying to scramble and cover those sequences. We've had a lot of questions, so we included this last bullet point, are how do satellite trips work now with the improvements to the systems that we have, like TTS and UBL for reserves on days off. How does out of base work? When a satellite trip goes into any of the systems, it will be processed just like a normal trip, and it will be processed in base first, and then it will be processed out of base. So those that are in the base that prefer that type of flying will always get first dibs for it. You asked for it, and here it is. How are we going to deal with the cartels? So we do have some language on it, and what it's going to end up going into implementation, but how we kind of envision it is the misuse of the scheduling systems that are impacting everyone who is trying to use the systems as they were to be created. It gives a mechanism for that to be addressed. And what that may look like is you abuse the system, you're going to get kicked out of it. And you may just be a PBS bidder with no flexibility outside of that system. So I hope that that gives good pause on how we use our scheduling systems moving forward.
I think you put it quite perfectly as you asked for it, right? We've kind of gone round and round on what we can do about this. And we took a survey also Survey said not to remove private drops. That was one of them, private trades, right? And so this is our fix to this.
Electronic communication system. So just as a little background, American wanted to really have carte blanche on having electronic communication for flight attendants. If you don't know, the pilots did that in their contract, and we wanted to make sure we had guardrails around the language and agree to only the places where we felt it benefited flight attendants most. And we want to see the test. We didn't even see the system, right? We want to see what it looks like. We want it tested because we want the company to roll out a successful system that works. So it's kind of nice that the pilots have it and are starting so they can be the guinea pigs. These are some of the issues that we have agreed to have electronic notification for: calling in sick, requesting release, no show to Deadhead, last live leg, and sorry, I'm losing my voice. And voluntary extension. I know some will be upset that they have to talk to crew schedule less, but we'll get past it.
Yeah.
We also agreed to some limited instances for electronic notification and rescheduling. So prior to report, the more than 3 days or within 3 days. So more than 3 days, usually see that now as a banner, probably in the crew portal. And most changes to your schedule within 3 days, you don't even get any call or anything from crew schedule. So now at least you'll get the electronic notification. And if there are changes, if you're going to work the trip or come off the trip. After report, this is when nothing's happening to your trip, but you might be rescheduled to prevent a delay or cancellation. You'll get the electronic notification, but if you don't acknowledge, a crew schedule will call you. And I forgot to say, part of the guardrails we put on is that this will be to initiate, receive, and respond. So if you're getting a push notification of a schedule change, you'll have a response and you'll have to know if crew schedule is seeing yours. The messages will all be date and time stamped and saved for 90 days. That way you're not screenshotting every single communication from the company. There's going to be a place for you to look for that. And back to this. So after report, you'll need to know what your reschedule is. That'll be electronic notification. Same with after origination. If there's nothing, no changes on your trip, but you're being rescheduled to prevent delay or cancellation, you'd get an electronic notification. And if you don't respond, then you're going to get a backup phone call from crew schedule. And then once you have been rescheduled, you would know the remainder of your trip through electronic notification.
Right, thanks, Susan. I think it's really important that everybody realizes it's two-way texting. This is not just them texting you. It is two-way. And it is also, we made sure that there was record of this, that there was a receipt. We know you are all screenshotting your entire life here at this job today, and that needs to end. And this will help.
So definition of a completed trip. This is something that I'm very happy that we were able to secure. Being based in Miami, I know we saw this a lot, where you would board a flight, you push off the gate, take off, you have to land, come back to the gate because, you know, mechanical, and they end up taking the plane out of service, and you've been on duty for, 5 hours, 6 hours, and they cancel the flight, you end up going home, and you only get call out or duty time, whichever is greater. That's how it works today, right? So what we did was we expanded the definition of a completed trip to include any return to the gate for any reason. So that would include returning the gate for mechanicals. If you subsequently do that and cancel, it will provide the minimum of 5 hours pay. So that's a good change. SID rig, another one of the first rigs I think we've seen in many years. So we're very happy for this. The SID rig is going to apply to sit times, actual sit times. So which is not scheduled, it's actual sit times where they go over 2 hours and 30 minutes. How it works is you'll get 1 minute of flight pay, no credit, for every 2 minutes of the actual sit time in excess of that 2 hours and 30 minutes. So if you have as you can see here, there's an example. There's a sit time that is scheduled for 2 hours. It ended up being 4 hours and 59 minutes. So the time over the 2:30 mark is 2:29. The next, you had a scheduled sit of 3 hours, it turns out to be 3:20. So that 2 hours and 30 minutes, you had 50 minutes that went over the 2:30. So both of those times together would come to 3 hours and 19 minutes. So at the rate of 1 minute pay for 2 hours, 2 minutes of on duty time, the sit time, that comes to 1 hour and 39 minutes of extra pay, which is going to pay on top of the sequence. It's going to pay on top of your guarantee. This is additional pay that is paid on top of the value of the trip. So it's a very good thing. Now, it's important to note that when you're looking at these actual sit times, it's for each sit, right? It's not, you don't take, if you have 2 hour sits, 2 hour sits, that's a total of 4 hours. It's not going off that time. It's each individual sit. That's clear.
Boarding times. So we were able to keep and very successfully keep the contractual boarding times in the contract, which is great. They wanted them to come out. It changed a little bit as far as the seating, and we did separate for domestic wide body, but it's not any different than it is today. It's the same boarding time. What is also changed is flexing the time. The company can give APFA notice of 60 days if they would like to change or are going to change the boarding time for domestic. It's by 5 minutes, increasing. This is not something that the company will necessarily do. It's not necessarily every month. It's very difficult. It's not just flight attendants that this affects. It affects agents. It affects passengers. So this is something that they will tell us. And once they flex it up, they could change with 60 days notice back to the 30, 35, 35 minutes. And here's the international boarding times. It's same thing, nothing changed as far as the boarding times in the contract as they are today, except for the flex. So they have 45, they could go down in time for NIPD or IPD. Same thing, they have to give a 60-day notice. It's not something that's easily done for them with so many different systems that it involves.
Moving on to
Moving on
VE.
to VE.
Sorry.
It's okay. So VE, yay, we have a backstop if you want to do it. You will no longer be on duty till you drop dead. So 4 hours is the backstop for domestic VE and for the non-long range. Any of the other VEs like mid-range didn't change. With the backstop, the first 3 hours, you would earn 200% of the duty day. If it goes into that 4th hour, you would earn 300% for the duty day total. So this is I think is great, especially if you want to do it. I mean, today, I think a lot of people don't do it because you never know when you're going to be done.
All right, and I think we're moving on to Reese, right?
Yep.
All right, Josh.
So we added new pay to the agreement that is going to pay above guarantee. These are options of pay no credit that are new in the tentative agreement. So you can see them listed here. We've talked a little bit about boarding pay and sit rig and hotel penalty pay already. TTS and UBL use on days off is, and that also will then include red flag, is going to be a new option that reserves have. And then we also already talked about the 30 minutes per day of vacation if vacation is less than 7 days. So these are all new pay for reserves that'll pay above that 75-hour guarantee. And those are all new pay that'll pay in addition to position premium, per diem, VE, training, all of which were increased under the agreement. And of course, ETB, which you can pick up on your days off today, and there's no change to picking up going forward. So really just wanted to highlight all the new opportunities for pay. And then we also pulled a couple of schedules on the next slide to really highlight how that new boarding pay is going to work. And also, if you haven't checked out the boarding pay calculator on apfa.org, please do that because it's really easy to use and you can plug in your schedule for July at the end of the month. Now you can really see how much more pay you would have earned had this boarding pay been in place already. So here we are looking at a first year flight attendant who's DFW based. She was on reserve and she flew 84 hours and 22 minutes with a total of 32 domestic boardings. So we plugged in her two types of boardings that she did domestically. She did 10 on the 319 and 320, and then 22 on the 321, 737. So she is earning an additional $319.40 under the agreement. And so we calculated out the difference there, right? So currently at first year pay, $30.35, you can see what she would have earned. And then you can see, yes, she's getting a pay increase just like anybody else, but also with this added boarding pay, she's getting a difference of $780. So that's a significant improvement. And that's not even including all of the other things that we talked about on the last slide. Or if she had wanted to pick time up on her days off. So just really wanting to highlight that there. And then on the next slide, we are showing a 7th year flight attendant. So the same exact schedule, those 32 boardings, but you can really see the difference in the boarding pay. And I think Tim or somebody talked about this earlier, which is that boarding pay is tied to your pay step. So as your pay step increases, your boarding pay step increases. And if you're under 13 years and you're still climbing, remember, you're going to get 2 pay raises every year over the life of the agreement. So you'll also get 2 pay raises in your boarding pay. So your boarding pay is going to increase as your pay rate increases. And so that's just a really great new improvement. And remember, this is all pay. Just here you go. Here's a check. It's no credit attached. It's going to be paying above that guarantee. So huge for reserves. On the next slide.
Reese, we're trying to, oh, there we
That
go.
one's good.
Okay.
We're trying to fix the slides because I just want to make sure everybody sees, hang on, Josh.
There's the 7th
Sees
year.
the difference for
Okay.
the 7th year, it's 1325. So I'm sorry, we
That's okay.
didn't realize you couldn't see the bottom of the slides when we were doing the presentation. All right, we'll move on to the next one.
All right. So we also wanted to calculate. So that was a first year and a 7th year flight attendant based in DFW. We wanted to look at some of our high seniority reserve bases. And as we know, any base can become high seniority reserve at any time. So we pulled the schedule of a Phoenix-based flight attendant. She's at the 13th year pay step, and she's a high time flyer, right? So she worked 90 hours and 8 minutes and 25 domestic boardings. She did 3 IPD boardings, and there is her difference in pay. So again, just really want to emphasize this is a difference. She's already working this schedule today. Now she just, under the agreement, would be earning an additional $1,900, doing nothing different than she did today. And I also want to point out on this schedule, or $1,900, which, you know, she is in Phoenix, she's serving 3 times a year. I mean, that's almost $6,000 more a year, just doing exactly what you do today, which is huge. And I want to point out on this one, which will become more important on the next slide, which is that, so she has a week of vacation, but at the end of the month, but only one of those days is inside of this period of July. The rest of the days are going to be in August. And so because of that, her vacation is a week. And so it's 4 hours of pay and credit. And so that 4 hours of pay and credit is going towards her guarantee for the month of July. But on the next slide, we have another Phoenix-based flight attendant at the 13+ year pay step. So he has 6 days of vacation. And we wanted to pull this schedule because the previous flight attendant, she was a high time flyer. She was bidding in Rota and Rota D, working a lot. This guy, as you can see, is a little bit more of a low time flyer. He also has some vacation and some training. And so those 6 days of vacation now have the 30 minutes of pay no credit that are going to be paying above his guarantee. So you can see that their 30 minutes times 6 days is 3 hours. So he's earning an additional amount there of $246. And then you can also see his boarding pay. Remember, he's low time. He only worked 3 trips. He brought in a trip from his line holder month. And so his boarding pay is there at $280. And it really, again, just highlights that he is still earning an additional $1,600 for the month. Nothing has changed as far as the way he is going to be scheduled. This is just new money that he would have earned had this agreement been in place today. And then because he did have training, I wanted to just highlight, we've talked about already, but his training pay also would have doubled, and training pay is paid above guarantee.
And looks like we have a few formatting issues that when they came over to the slides, they didn't quite line up. So we'll clean those up and make sure that these examples get out to all the flight attendants. All right.
All right, so for reserve rotation, yes, there is going to be an additional year of straight reserve. However, that will not apply for anyone currently on property, and it will only start after the date of ratification, and this is really important, the date of the implementation. So once this gets programmed, it will become anyone hired after that date would be subject to this rotation. We're not going to bring anybody on property, have them start under one rotation and then go, oh, whoops, you're changing rotation. So we saw that with JCBA, and we don't want that to happen again. So we were very, made sure that this language was in there. For high seniority reserve bases, we have secured language that requires the company to meet with APFA and at our request to discuss methods to reduce the reserve seniority levels at high seniority bases. We've heard concerns that this language could allow a change to rotation at a base. Let me make sure that everyone understands that we have processes in place when there's to be a change to the contract. It can't just be done. It has to be go through our processes that we have in place with our Constitution and our policy manuals.
I'm going to add in a little to that, okay? So any major change to this contract that could affect somebody differently, right? It could harm them, or somebody might not like it. The membership will vote on that, okay? If we're going to make a major change to a provision in the contract, the membership would vote on it. So this addition to the contract is truly for us to sit down at those bases and to see what we can do, see how we can get more flight attendants into the base, because that's what the fix is, quite honestly, for these high seniority bases, is we need more flight attendants to be allowed to transfer into those bases. So I know Wendy told me that it's out there that, oh my gosh, we're just going to change the rotation at those bases, and that cannot happen. It doesn't happen like that. We don't have that ability in an LOA. I can't sign an LOA for something like that. It definitely could harm some people. And so I want to make sure everybody understands that's not the intent of that sentence, is for us to change the system that we have, such as, the rotation system.
All right, and the last bullet point is reserves who take a VLOA will not receive reserve credit. We know that it's important that we want to see reserve numbers go down, and with this, hopefully that will help that. But if we continue on the path that we have today, those reserve numbers continue to stay high because people aren't serving reserve.
It's been a while since we've seen those VLOAs, but they're back.
Yep.
Right. I think this is Reese.
All right, so I was going through the questions that were being submitted, and we got a few of people saying that they didn't see any reserve improvements. So I really hope they're paying attention now, because we're going to get really into it. And just on this first slide alone, if the slide will come up.
Oh, sorry, that's me. I'm looking at the wrong screen.
You know, you can see all the news that are on there in the executive summary, either online or the one that's being mailed to your house. We have about 1.5 pages of new improvements. So there are lots of new improvements to be had. We kind of organize the improvements based on what they do for your schedule. So you're going to see them organized like that here as well. And so we're going to start with how we improved days off with reserves. So we started with the monthly bidding in PBS, and Tim talked about this a little bit, how we offered a new option for reserves to bid a block of days off in PBS. And then we also had new protections, new opportunities to earn pay, new guarantees throughout the month for days off. So we talked already about picking up on TTS and UBL, including red flag. We talked about out of base pickup in UBL. We did have to adjust the release time for a reserve who's picking up on their last day off before tomorrow being a first day of reserve availability. We had to move that time up 2 hours, and that is now 1600. The reason for that change is the FAR changed from 8 hours to 10 hours. And so to accommodate that 2 hour adding of rest, we did have to adjust the release time to be 2 hours earlier. And I know that can be, you know, it seems like you can't pick up in trips, you know, already at 1800, but remember we are adding TTS UBL in. So although the the restriction is going to be there now a little bit earlier, there's going to be more trips than ever before to pick up on your days off if that's something that you're interested in doing. We've also added in an option to ballot days off trading with the company. So today it's a phone call that you make to crew scheduling. They may or may not process it right then, but then you have to call back. In the meantime, somebody else calls, got the day off that you wanted, because it's all based on coverage. And it was just really complicated and required you to kind of be tied to your phone and hope you got a good scheduler for the day. And instead, we've implemented like a balloting system where everybody's request for day off trading will be processed at the same time 2 days prior to the day off of the request. So that's a huge improvement for those that are trying to move their schedule around. We also implemented, this is something we heard a lot from flight attendants, particularly on RAP D, or the last day of RAP. So your RAP always ends at 23:59 on your last day on call, but we have a provision that enables you to report outside of your RAP, because for the first couple of hours of your RAP, you're not able to report because you get minimum call out. And so what we were hearing from flight attendants was that they were reporting past 23:59 on their flex day. That's not fair. So what we've done is we've put a restriction in on that. So you at least know that your flex days are there for the company to use if needed, but at least you won't be reporting on your day off. You have to report on your last day of reserve availability, but you can work on that flex day still. We also improved Rota D processing to protect flex days. So today, sequences are assigned to the earlier RAP working into a flex day when there is still a reserve in the later RAP who is legal for the entire sequence without working into a flex day. Those two groups are processed at the same time in the earlier RAP and then in the later RAP. What we've done is we've separated them. So now it'll be reserves who are legal to work the sequence in its entirety in the earlier RAP, reserves who are legal to work the sequence in its entirety in the later RAP. Then it'll go back and say reserves who are legal to work the sequence into one flex day in the earlier RAP, and then into the later RAP into one flex day. So this will hopefully improve protection on flex days instead of processing those two groups at the same time. We also guaranteed day off replacement when flown into your flex day or golden day. We know that, reserves are sometimes you're assigned into your flex day, or the sequence that you were assigned goes into your golden day. Days off are really important to reserves. You only get 12 of them. So we heard a lot of headache happens with this because of the mutual agreement that you would have to have with crew scheduling in order to get that day off replaced. And so what we've done is we've guaranteed that on the opposite end of the block of days off that the day you were flown into came from, you'll now be guaranteed that day off. This does not change your option to request a different day or to forego the extra day off and just be paid above guarantee. It just guarantees that day off. So what this means is, say you were scheduled Monday through Wednesday, and you had Thursday and Friday as days off, but your sequence has now gone into that first Thursday, you're guaranteed the Saturday off. So you can still request a day later on in the month if that's what you'd like to do. But if crew scheduling doesn't agree to that later day off and you would still like a day off, you know that you're guaranteed that Saturday. So you still have your 2 days off in a row, which is important. Next, we have our reserve improvements for Rhoda and Rhoda D. So just the reserve improvements that we made in the way that you bid your schedule day to day. So again, lots of green new on there, as you can see. We have implemented a specific identifier for standby shifts. This is a big pain point we heard from our reserves, that it was sometimes, because of the generic bidding properties, it was hard to bid for standby and get this exact standby shift that you wanted. Also, we heard that the standby shifts, there was no transparency. It was hard to know which standby shifts crew scheduling was going to be assigning the following day. And so what we've done is put in parameters that each standby shift will have to be published in the bid packet, and those parameters are going to be identified specifically. So this 4-hour shift that starts at 10 a.m. and goes till 2 p.m. Is going to be needed for a 3-day reserve. It's standby shift A, and it's going to be available for Rhoda bidding tomorrow. You know, when you bid for standby shift A, that is the shift that you're bidding on. There's no more guesswork. You'll also be able to see the speakers that are needed in Rhoda bidding and be able to know which standby shifts are going to be assigned the following day. The speaker thing is really important because we heard from our speakers that it was really frustrating to know, since speaker sequences are assigned before non-speaker sequences, it was unclear, it was hard to know if they were needed to bid for a speaker sequence and then use their seniority to bid for their first choice. But if they weren't needed for a speaker sequence and they wanted a different sequence, or if they just wanted to rock, they didn't know if they were needed for that speaker sequence or not. So now all of that is going to be transparent and available for flight attendants to know, speakers to know, before bidding in Rhoda. So they'll be able to know, okay, there are 4 speaker sequences, there are 5 speakers in Rhoda today for tomorrow. I'm the most senior. I do not need to bid for this speaker trip, therefore I will not, and I will process my Rhoda bid outside of speaker. That's a huge improvement upon what they have today. We also guaranteed that crew scheduling will redistribute open time by noon, home base prior the day before. So by noon, all the trips that they need to move out of base, because there's going to be more open time than there are reserves in that base, will have to happen. Because something that we heard from flight attendants was that they would bid for sequences that at 2 p.m. or 2:30, you put your bid in at 1, but at 2:30, crew scheduling makes that assessment and decides that they're going to transfer a bunch of trips out of the base, and those were all the trips that you bid on. And so when you go in to get your award thinking you bid for a trip that you're going to get tomorrow, all of those trips had been transferred and you bid on a bunch of trips that were not in open time any longer. So there's now a restriction that they'll have to do that by noon. So you know that if you're bidding in Rhoda after noon, the trips that you're bidding on are the ones that are going to be assigned in that base. Now, of course, there is a stipulation that if there is some unknown circumstance, extenuating circumstance, that trips can be transferred at any time, but extenuating circumstance does mean something that's a big deal. We also added a RAP-D restriction. This was part of our social media campaign, so you may have already seen this, but the major points of the RAP-D restriction are that it's going to be 1400 to 0200 system-wide. So no more of these RAP-Ds that are starting at 5 p.m., going until 5 a.m., and then assigning early morning departures to our RAPD reserves who were on call all night. And also RAPD will be modified to end as soon as the last flight has departed for the day, for the night. So if you're in a base that maybe has more early morning departures and doesn't really have those late night departures, even though RAPD is scheduled to go until 2 a.m., your personal RAP in that base might end earlier than 2 a.m.
Do you need a break?
No, we're good. We're good.
Okay, I know,
haven't talked
we're
this
all
much
falling
since we
apart here.
started,
We've all been
but-
kind of working nonstop for quite a while.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we've got a few who are fighting off, the illness. You okay? You can take a drink of water. All
Okay.
right. Otherwise, Wendy can add in if you want.
Okay. No, I got it. We're
all
good.
right.
Thank you.
uh,
All right. Okay. So next, another one that we've posted up on social media, so you may have seen this already, is that we changed how aggressive hours are going to be processed when it comes to timing out specifically. So today it's your first 40 hours of pay and credit, whether those 40 hours come from rota trips, whether they come from vacation, jury duty, bereavement, any pay and credit that goes on your reserve line. Once it gets to 40 hours, any additional sequences that you bid aggressively will not count towards timing out. This is really frustrating, especially for what we call reward the hustle flyer, and bid aggressively and picking sequences that they want to work. And what we've done is we've adjusted that, so it'll be now the first 40 aggressive hours awarded. So if you start the month with 40 hours of pay and credit, let's say vacation, bereavement, jury duty, and it's day 1 of the month, you can still go aggressive for 40 additional hours, bringing your total hours now to the month to 80 hours, and then you'll still be able to time out in 5 more hours at 8501. So a huge improvement there, especially for anyone who uses that bidding aggressive property. We also have implemented clicks for everything. So today you only get your clicks for sequences that are assigned from Rota D. And going forward, you're going to get clicks for any sequence assigned or awarded by Rota and any sequence assigned or awarded by Rota D. The next change that we implemented that is going to be an improvement is that Rota D will now be run within 60 minutes from the first UBL run. Today, this is a pain point for lots of people in that it's hard to know exactly when Rota D is going to be running after UBL. So we put this time limit on there so that everybody's on the same page. And we also put some parameters on there to ensure that reserves are not then just getting minimum call out for sequences. So if the sequence opens less than 3 hours to departure or 4 hours in a co-terminal, then the sequence will be immediately run through Rota D after running through UBL once. So that will limit the minimum call outs. Also for sequences that open midnight to 5 a.m. and depart after 11 a.m., those sequences may be held until 7 a.m. That's a protection for the line holders because they may not be paying attention from midnight to 5 a.m. at what trips are opening, so that they can wake up at 6 a.m. and see the trips that they want. But again, we wanted to protect the reserves and make sure that they're not getting late minimum call out for a early morning departure. So that's why the restriction of departs after 11 a.m. is there. We also put in the language that the company will have to rerun UBL immediately before Rota D if necessary. The next improvements that we have are for standby. We talked about last minute call out already. Those last minute call out UBL bidders are going to have to be assigned, or they're bidding to be assigned before a standby. So standbys will be conserved in those instances. We also changed the legalities for standby assignments to the standbys report time. Today it's the sequences report time, and it'll follow with this chart that's in the contract today.
based on the standby's report time. We also added an option in for voluntary standby extension if you're sitting standby and you wanted to extend your shift. And we also changed how standby pay will be. It's going to be until the report of the assigned sequence based on the known departure time. So the issue that we see today is standbys who start their shift, say at 6 a.m., but at 10:30, they're assigned to a trip that is a delayed departure. It was supposed to depart, say, at 5 a.m., but they're getting it at 10:30. They're not getting any standby pay and credit because the language today pays you only until the report of the sequence that you're assigned, but it doesn't account for the fact that some sequences assigned to standbys are delayed. So this will now give you standby pay and credit up until the report of that 10:30 departure, which would be 9:30. And so you're at least earning standby pay and credit from 6 a.m. to 9:30, which you wouldn't have earned today. And then our last slide are just some other miscellaneous reserve improvements. We added in-flight managers into the priority of trip assignment to use before line holders. Wendy, I think, also already talked about last sequence, last series pay protection for reserves on when they pick up on their days off at the end of the month. And then we also added in some clarification on what happens to a reserve when there's a sequence cancellation or removal. This will give the reserves ability to start earning pay and credit when they've reported to the airport if they're not released by crew scheduling. So what we see today is these reserves report to the airport and then are put back on RAP, and they end up getting lost in the system. And more frustratingly, you're already at the airport, so being put back on RAP when you're sitting there with your bags packed and your uniform on, just let me start earning pay and credit. And this was particularly something we heard from the membership, so we wanted to make sure that this was clarified and beneficial to our reserves when there's a cancellation or a removal.
Thank you, Reese.
You're welcome.
All right. Moving on to speakers.
So in this section, it's important to remember we did not change the total number of speakers on board from current language. The change was on aircraft with fewer than 50 business class seats, the speakers will be in any cabin. And if there's a business class with 50 or more seats, we'll maintain the current language, which is speakers per cabin. So we recognize the value speakers bring to a flight, and the change was not to diminish that, but it was intended to honor the seniority of both speakers and non-speakers when determining cabin positions. So basically, when you're working an aircraft with less than 50 seats, your seniority will determine your position in the cabin. And the next slides just illustrate that a little better. The 777-300 will be same as current per cabin because the business class is greater than 50 seats. The -9 will be per aircraft, so that one will change. And then I don't think we have this aircraft yet, the 789P, that will also be same as current per cabin because it will have a larger business class.
Okay, let's talk about deadheading. So we do have a couple of, I'll be honest with you, kind of like restrictions. So anytime that we do like new service, seasonal startup, and we don't service that route now, we would have to deadhead on another airline. So if you have a sequence such as that on your line, you will be restricted from trading it 48 hours prior to report. That would be a trade or a drop. And the reason why that is in place is due to the passenger manifest on another airline. If it's an online carrier, if it's us, that restriction is not there. So it's only if it's on another airline. To build off of that as well, if you have a deadhead on that other airline going somewhere, you are not going to be able to exercise a 16G deadhead waiver on that. If you, for example, if you are deadheading on BA from Philly to, let's say, London, and you live in London, you would be able to be released from the deadhead since you already reside there. But as far as changing that flight from another city to London, you would not be afforded that. And for all the Hawaii commuters, because there's quite a few of you, we now have you included in our deadhead flexes, and Alaska as well. We have put this out before, but just to run through it real quick, a deadhead on the last leg of a sequence, which is a 16H. What you know today will maintain. However, we have expanded it to include self-booking, which is huge. That means once I have reported for the sequence, I can go in there and grab a seat on the self-book and not wait till the day of when there are people everywhere at the gate trying to get on. I will have a seat. And I feel good with that slide. It's
Yeah.
kind of
And
self-explanatory.
I think that really part of this improvement is that now it's after report that
Yes.
you can change your flight rather than after your last working leg. I think it's a
Correct.
huge increase.
Huge.
Yeah, improvement here.
Okay, now for the Deadhead Stand-Up. This is a little bit of a mixed bag because some people are really happy with this and some people are not. So let's just kind of walk through it. And what a Deadhead Stand-Up is, in today's world, the only way crew scheduling can stand up a deadheader is to prevent a delay or cancellation, or if there's no reserves available. It goes back to those basic rescheduling principles that we discussed earlier. So what this looks like is after you have reported and prior to the release of the last working leg of the sequence, there's your time band of when this can occur. If it's outside of that, it's not occurring because it's not contractual. So at this point, once you have reported and they have need for you because the crew that was supposed to work the flight in which you're deadheading, or they do not have a crew for it, they can pull the NS and see who is deadheading on it, and they can have you work it. That will be ran as a normal reschedule, so you will be afforded all the pay protections that come with a reschedule. And then when that election is made by crew scheduling, they will offer it to the most senior flight attendant first. And when it gets to the point of assigning, it will be junior up. Did I miss anything?
Oh, just once you reported for the sequence.
Correct.
And before the last working leg.
Correct.
We should clarify too that when they stand you up to deadhead, it's to stand you up to deadhead that same flight that you were on.
Yeah.
It doesn't open you up to being rescheduled somewhere else. It's for that particular flight.
And that would also be covered under the electronic notification pieces that we discussed earlier. And that's me again. So on transfers, so probationary flight attendants, while they are on probation, they have the ability to exercise either a vacancy or a mutual while on probation. Once they have concluded probation, they can do whatever they would like to do like a normal flight attendant. We did modify the vacancy award. So we changed that a little bit because in today's world, the language is such for an active flight attendant and inactive flight attendant, and it goes into the first 15 days of your award in that base. If you are on an unpaid for those first 15 days, you can lose your transfer and you will revert back to your previous base. You will lose your transfer. No one wants to lose their base transfer. And it also, when you lose it, no one else was able to hold that slot. So what we have done is we have closed the loophole on that. And so you have to be showing an active flight attendant either on the date of the award or the effective date of the transfer. If you are active on either one of those days, transfer is yours. You're going to hold it. There will no longer be reverting back to your original base. Loophole is closed. Okay, so IOD. If you are on an unpaid IOD, currently you will not accrue your longevity seniority, which is for pay purposes. Now you will. After this contract is ratified. We also were able to secure an RHRA for those flight attendants that elect to retire with American. Currently, you can cash out your sick bank for the $8.65 an hour, which is a bit insulting. So at this point now, you can take your entire sick bank at retirement and it will be cashed out 50% of your hourly wage, and it will be placed in a notional RHRA account for you. And then you can use that, as you can see on the red wording, for reimbursement. You will need to provide 4 months notice of your intent to retire to be eligible for the RHRA. If you give less than 4 months notice, then at that point you would have the cash out option.
Oh, sorry. Training pay. So we doubled training pay for CQ and classroom and distance learning, CQ distance learning. And if you are having to travel on another day other than the day you are attending training. So let's say you're in Dallas and there's bad weather, you finish training, you're supposed to travel, but you have to stay over. The next day you travel, you will now get $150. Also important to notice is that, and this has been out there for a while, DFW-based flight attendants who live more than 50 miles from the training facility will be provided a hotel for CQ base equipment, including a bridge hotel or other training events. So yay for Dallas-based flight attendants who don't get that today. And there's a lot of people who are based here and commute, and they need that hotel room too.
Section 30 and 31 cover our grievances and arbitration process, and that's crucial to enforcing our contract and making sure that when the company issues discipline, it's just. So in these two sections, we took out what wasn't working and added new language. The most important thing is we added, maintain the ability to grieve any action of the company. And we also, at the basis, kept informal discussions, which can be used to resolve a dispute before a grievance is filed. And the dispute resolution conference is still held at the base level, but it used to be facilitated by a quote unquote neutral facilitator, which was chosen by the company, which, as we all know, was never neutral. So that was a good fix. We've added new language to do our own training. We're not doing joint training with the company anymore. We're going to use our money to train our reps to defend our contract. Contract dispute was added to expedite contractual disputes. They can bypass the base. Contractual issues are rarely resolved at the base anyway, so now they could be moved quicker to be expedited and settled faster. There's a new grievance determination conference, the GDC. This group is going to be 3 union and 3 company. They meet every other month, and we're hoping that that also is going to promote quicker resolution of grievances because these parties are meeting more. And we also have disciplinary letters will only remain in the file for 1 active year, not 2 years.
I wasn't meaning to rush you. So sorry about that. I moved to the next slide as you were talking. I'm looking at the time and going, oh my gosh, where has it gone? All right.
I'm going to go quick. I know we're on the downhill.
Yeah.
Okay, so changes to commuting, we were able to secure other airlines to qualify. We were also able to secure on your first flight. That is including those other airlines. As long as the flight is not booked 24 hours prior to departure, more than 90%, that means there's at least 10% available, it will qualify. So in that 24 hours, if it operationally goes to poo and it's just everything is full, as long as you've got that screenshot, you will be covered. As you can see below that, we've got a green thumbs up that has more than 10%. The red thumbs down has less than 10% available. So that's what that looks like. That's what it looks like for another airline, being JetBlue, because you will need to provide a substantiation, and that is adequate. Also on crew rest, one of the things we were able to secure is if either the inbound or outbound flight is more than 7 hours, it will apply to both segments. So New York to London, Philly, stuff like that, that will be covered. We are also able to secure those little bugs in the bed, is now a significant malfunction.
Miscellaneous. So these are a few things. I can go through this pretty quickly. These are some odds and ends that we need to touch on. The CBA, the printing, they will print 15% of the total flight attendant population by base. In an effort to go green. Also, it is a living document, so things do tend to be updated over the course of the agreement. It's always on everybody's tablets. It's online as well. There will be 500 copies provided for APFA headquarters. Cabin cleaning, this is a hot topic right now. Some people did not realize this is already in the JCBA. It is. It's not being used with good reason. It's very limited in the JCBA what they can do for cabin cleaning. It only applies to domestic, only on flights under 1,000 miles. But as you all know, you've probably seen before we're even passengers are declaiming, they're coming on board to clean the aircraft, right? So they are not going to be able to just suddenly have flight attendants start cleaning the aircraft because we cannot be cleaning while we are having passengers evacuate, right? Passengers deplane.
Okay,
So-
this is the language. There's no change to the language today and what we do today. Let's just say it like that. There is no change. People are worried that, oh, they're going to be changing. No, there's no change. Okay,
And also, you know, people are saying, why didn't you get rid of it?
let's move on.
Oh,
We're
Insurance, another thing. No change to healthcare costs in insurance in the contract. What is in the contract does not cover our healthcare premiums. That is not a contractual cost. What is contractual is the employee's aggregate contribution, which is our cost that we have to, that they can pass on to us is 21%. That is in the contract. It did not change from the JCBA to today. It's not been touched. So option to use vacation days when additional days off are granted for bereavement days. That is now an option that you can use your vacation days at the full rate of pay. Of course, it does subject to the management approval as well.
Thank you, Tim.
You're welcome.
Okay, next slide.
Furlough severance. Oh. So we did change this. This is actually a good change because now it's going to be based on your paid hours in the most recent 12 active months. Rather than just the previous 12 months, it's your previous 12 months. So that's a good change. Red flag. Change to that flight attendant, make bid generic or specific when balloting for red flag sequences. We did hear this with flight attendants, so we're happy to be able to add that.
Today we can do it generically.
Generic.
And tomorrow we'll be able to do it specific and generic. And we've had some issues. We've had grievances. We were able to fix that in the contract. Okay, so the next slide, I have an implementation timeline here. So I talked about that a little bit with Joe. We are working to make sure it is exactly what we want it to be before we sign it. I will get that done by the end of this week, and we will get that onto the website. We know how important it is for everyone to see that implementation timeline. And we heard you. We will get it out there as soon as we can. It should be by the end of this week.
And on the red line track CBA, thank you to every flight attendant who has emailed us with a citation correction. We've actually been working that on the background, but it was more important for us to get a red line out to everyone. So that will be updated. And when it is updated, I'm assuming we're going to have a little tag on there going, hey, it's been updated, guys, on this date. So
yeah,
coming soon.
Okay, and just to let everybody know, so these were the highlights. There are more changes that are improvements to our contract that we've been talking to you for quite a long time about, okay? And so we had to take it out. The slide deck we're at slide number 75. We did 167 slides, I believe, for our leadership so that they saw every single change that has happened. Like we took moving expenses out, right? We took out a few, I'm trying to remember the other sections because it was changes that needed clarification, that needed an improvement, but it didn't, how can I say, it wasn't enough to be in this slide deck. you will get a booklet in the mail. I believe they have already been mailed. Is that correct? Or are they being mailed at the end of this week? The booklet.
Booklets have been, yes.
End of this week. Okay. So the book is going in the mail. We sent them to the printers last Friday morning at 4 a.m. They started printing and they will be in the mail at the end of this week. It is what is on our APFA website today under the TA summary. It is the same as that. We have because we were on a very tight timeline to make sure we could get everything done. There are a few minor mistakes in it, and you probably have seen them out on Instagram. For those of you who are on Instagram, we probably need to put them out elsewhere also. I think also on Facebook, actually. We had a few things that maybe were little mistakes. So we just corrected them, and you will see them also on the website. Nothing major. Yeah, sure.
Where it is corrected on the website, you can actually see the bullet point corrections.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right, so I think we should go to questions so we can get some in. I hear we have 400.
500.
A lot of them are repeats. So I think what we're gonna dive in right now. But if we don't get to your question, we are not gonna get to all 400 because we are flying to Chicago tonight for a base visit tomorrow. And so we will take these and we will use them in our next town hall, and we will answer questions in that town hall. Anything that we can to help provide you as much information as we possibly can, we are going to do that. We will also add them to our website under the FAQs so that you have that information there. But let's go over to those and let's see here. Does anybody have one they're dying to answer that we can go to first? Because you guys have been looking at it a lot more than I have, I think. Okay, well, the very first question we got today, well, this is interesting, was, are we getting back the flight attendant we lost? This is our staffing arbitration. Larry, you want to talk about it?
Yeah, this is in regards to the staffing arbitration. This did not fall under negotiations. We had the staffing arbitration back in April. We're just now finishing up the company and the union with their closing briefs. Once those closing briefs have been sent over to the arbitrator, then the arbitrator, there's no timeline for them to make a decision. But once those closing briefs, along with the entire transcript, is sent over to the arbitrator, then they begin the process of making their decision.
All right, thanks, Larry. Okay, Wendy, you put your name on this one. How does the TA address inflated reserve numbers or solve reserve problems for senior bases like Phoenix and Raleigh? I think we kind of showed everybody what we have added to the contract to help with all of this. I mean, listen, reserve, when we started this process, was the #1 priority for our flight attendants. I know that was a while ago, but you can see all the reserve improvements we have. Also, when we were working on how open time is awarded and who can get trips in open time, we've added out of base UBL, right? We've also added the LMCO for line holders. We've added reserves. So all of that will help with our reserve numbers, as well as the stand-up deadhead. Sorry, Wendy, I should have let you answer it. I don't know why I just kept going on. All right, Kelly, does round trip cab expenses apply to LMCO?
Okay, I don't know who submitted this question, but I appreciate it because it was with citations, which I love. What you're referring to is the language in section 6C3, and that does provide for round trip cab expenses when authorized by crew scheduling. So ask.
Thank you. Tim, for retro pay, if you are out in an IOD, will you be credited the 75-hour reserve hours, 71 line hours, or no hours?
Interesting. Well, retro pay is based on what you were paid, right? So if you were on salary continuance, for instance, and you were paid by American, then that's the figure that they would be using. If you were getting a check from Sedgwick, that is not paid by American. So those funds would not be covered as the retro pay. Hopefully that answers that.
All right, what will the offer letter for new hires say for expected salary with this TA? Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna grab that one. That is a letter American creates. I would assume the company would update that after ratification.
With the hourly wage.
So it'd be the 75 hourly wage and boarding pay. They can't add into it because they don't know how many boardings there would
Be
be.
the wage
Most
increase.
likely, yeah. Okay, and some of these questions, it's really good you're asking them. We've had a lot of questions come into our call center who is sitting here with us today, as well as our CAT team. And so some of these we're still getting some clarification on. Okay, so we will get back to you on a few of these questions. Tim, I think you already talked about the cleaning, right? We can go past that one. Okay, this one, does a reserve need rest after conclusion of their wrap?
Short answer, no. But there is language that, you know, has to be followed for a back-to-back wrap. But no, we do not have to have, you know, minimum rest. You can do back-to-back wraps, in other words, but you can only start one wrap per calendar day. So they are never going to be able to do back-to-back, right? Because, you know, start one wrap per calendar day, but they can absolutely do back-to-back wraps.
Okay, thanks, Tim.
That's it.
Okay, when picking up via UBL out of base and you can't make a commuting flight due to no fault of your own, late plane mechanical, what protections are in place for the flight attendant? I noticed that if we pick up out of base, we cannot drop or trade the trip.
Okay, so on out of base, I would suggest highly that you are there or you have affirmatively secured your way there, because you will not be covered under the commuting language, because the commuting language state commute to your assigned base. That is not your assigned base. So please be cautious.
Kelly? Trying to get through some of these here. Okay, and I think we already talked about, you know, the dragging out of negotiations. There are a lot of questions in here about concern that this will happen again. We talked about that with Joe when Joe was on earlier, so we won't be answering those again. Let's see here. Which number?
33.
Can you go to 33?
That's a calculator.
Okay. 33. What justifies a 1% increase in retro pay between 2020 and 2021 and a 0% increase in retro pay between 2021 and 2022?
Want me to answer?
You-
So basically,
You
we
put your
were
name
able to,
on
well, yeah. We were able to secure 514 million to be used as retro pay. So when we look at the retro pay, right, the retro pay is really to account for the raises that should have been there all along had we had a contract that didn't, you know, end at the end of 2019. So also looking back, 2020 was COVID. That was when the schedule was pulled back. A lot of people off the property. People weren't flying as much. So we chose to put the smaller increase there and then build it up as we went along. Obviously, when you get to the end, we want the biggest increase to be right now when these negotiations have gone way too long. So, but really, the short answer is we decide where we want those percentages to be. It doesn't change the, it's not like the company was saying, oh, you only get this. We decided where they went, and this is what we came up with.
So I'm just going to add a tiny bit more to that. The 3% in that first year, we have to look at the majority. We know we have people who were flying high time during that time, but we have to look at the majority of flight attendants. In 2020, we had many flight attendants on 70 hours. We had many flight attendants on 19-hour leaves. And so that's why the 3% is in 2020. And absolutely 100% at this point, we know we have new hires out 1 year and 2 year. We want to make sure that they are also getting a decent retro check if they come out of this. Okay, Kelly. This is question 32. Will sit rigs be included in total pay shown for a trip already having more than a 2.5 hour sit built into it?
Okay, so I think a lot of this is going to come down to the implementation. However, keep in mind, SITRIG is for actual, not scheduled, so there shouldn't be any time built into the sequence, and it is pay no credit. So I kind of envision that they'll have to do a true up after the sequence has been completed since it's actual.
Thank you. Does anybody else have a number there that they're gonna throw out at me? Okay, here's one. Susan. So crew scheduling can replace ECS with phone contact as they please for any reason.
So also thank you for the citation on the question. So that 10W4 talks about ECS can only be utilized where we've agreed to it in the contract, but there's a line that says there's nothing in the section to prevent the company from using phone contact. The intent of that is not for them to go willy-nilly doing whatever they want. That's more for a situation where the ECS is down, right? And phone contact, they've got to have a means to connect with you, would be by phone.
Okay, and this question is about Deadhead, and Kelly, you have your name on it, but I think as I'm just reading the question really quickly, I can see people are really kind of reading, I almost think a little bit more into this stand-up Deadhead than really what it is. So this is the question, and this is why I'm thinking like, okay, wow, this is a lot. Let's see. All right. So can you clarify the following points about the Deadhead Stand-Up? How frequently can the company use this provision? Let's go one at a time. Yeah.
They can use that as needed after you've reported and prior to the release of your last working leg of the sequence.
For the Deadhead that you were scheduled on.
Correct.
Okay. How frequently can the company use this provision? I think that was it. No. Are there safeguards in place to prevent it from being used excessively as a crutch for poor reserve utilization?
I'm going to go out on my own here.
Yeah.
I feel like it will actually improve reserve utilization, because how many times have you worked the flight with 5 deadheading crews, or you've been one of those 5 deadheading crews on that flight, which is burning through reserves, because that's how our rescheduling language is. So this will hopefully cause for some more efficiencies, especially the deadhead there overnight, work back, and vice versa.
And when we were at the table, you know, definitely not just us hear this from flight attendants that, you know, I deadheaded on a flight and then I worked back, and there was another crew that was working that flight and deadheading back, right? We've heard that consistently for quite a long time. So has the company. They definitely have heard that from flight attendants going, this doesn't make sense. So this is definitely a change that we know, you know, we put parameters around it to safeguard it, meaning after report of the sequence and also prior to your last working leg. So don't forget those parameters that are added in to this.
We should point out that there's no change to the options you have as a person who's exercising that 16H2. You don't have to call up and request to be released, for instance. That's not what that's saying. It's saying that they're able to get you up until the end of that last worked leg.
Yeah. Okay, let's see here. Okay, all right. Wendy, this is about the boarding times. Okay, question 34. Can the union deny a 60-day request of the company to adjust boarding times? I see this happening on heavy months like summer and Christmas.
It is a notice to APFA for the change, and they do have to give 60 days, but it cannot be denied by APFA. It is a notice of that change.
But let's make sure everybody really understands this, okay? This is not just about they need more boarding time from the flight attendants. Remember when our passengers, you know, they have a boarding time on their tickets, right? That has to be changed. There are boarding times built into this entire system based on what we currently have. The agents all have to know. this is one of the things that we talked about at great length, because our concern was that we wanted to make sure you knew as a flight, we all know as a flight attendant, what our boarding times are for these flights. And so this is something that I believe, quite honestly, because they are now paying us for boarding, you guys all know they wanted to get rid of the contractual boarding times, and we said absolutely not. And so this was something that just gave them a little bit of flexibility. Do we think we're going to see it very frequently? No.
And the pay will be programmed too.
And
So
the
they
pay
don't have
will
to change the program.
increase or decrease, yeah.
And also, it doesn't behoove the company to have us trying to guess, well, which month is it and what's my boarding time? If they change it too often, we'll never know. And
Yeah.
to keep it consistent, so flight attendants know, when is my boarding time? Because we've all learned it.
Yep, thank you. Okay, how soon after the voting deadline will we be notified of the final results? You'll be notified, since this is a single sign-on, right? Pretty quickly.
Pretty immediately.
Yeah, it's not when we did SAV, right? We got those results within, they run it and then they verify it. The election company will verify it all. And then you'll probably most likely know within, I'm going to say 30 minutes to an hour. Okay, at the most. I mean, it's a very quick process. And you'll do it just like you did for SAV. We've definitely put a lot of work. Thank you, Todd Smetala, into our website and into our password reset. We learned a lot with SAV, and so we believe we are definitely ready for this vote. Okay, and then it says, should it become approved, will it be backdated to the beginning of the approval month, or will it start the following month? It will start the following month, and you will see in the implementation timeline, okay, there will be items that today say that data signing. Maybe we'll get those changed to October 1st, Tim. I just have to say that here. I got a smile out of him. But if September 12th, it's ratified, then October 1st, the pay rates go in, and everything that can go in on data signing goes in on October 1st. Now, the one thing that will, the 60-day count for sure will go from is the payout of the retro paycheck. That's 60 days from September 12th. 84. How many do we still have on, Josh?
1,043.
Wow, that's great. Just to let everybody know, we had what, 1,709 on. I think that's a new record here at APFA. Thank you all so much for joining. I can't tell you how excited I am to see so many of you on this call, because we really want to get this information to you. Okay, number 84, why not spread the date of signing percentage equally with every seniority to help new hires?
So this is a good question, actually, because for years, for the last several years, we have had no contractual increase, right? So starting with this TA, thankfully, now if you're coming on the property, you're going to have 2 increases a year. So thinking about this over the entire population, once you're topped out on pay 13 years over, you're getting 1 contractual raise a year. Our new hires are getting 2 contractual raises a year on their anniversary date when they started with the company, and then on October 1st of each of the years of the agreement. In addition, there's going to be boarding pay on top of that, on top of the hourly wage, which goes by the number of boardings you do. And as we know, the more junior you are, usually you are the ones that are having to board more of the flights. So that is why the breakdown is what it is.
And Joe kind of touched on this a little bit. When you are negotiating this, you're also, we're comparing to other airlines. Southwest is definitely lower than Delta. We are higher than Delta. We are higher than Southwest at the lower pay scales. And so that is also part of it. Thanks, Tim, for talking about the 2 steps. All right, I know that we are at 3:29, and I can tell you we've answered just a tiny percentage of all of these, but we're going to go through them. We're gonna get them ready for our next town hall. As I said, the next town hall isn't gonna be a repeat of this town hall. I'm just looking at all the negotiators going, what? We gotta go through all this again? Meaning a new PowerPoint, let's put it that way. Maybe some things we'll put back up on the slide, on the screen. But I think we wanna quickly go through the base visits. This is on the website. This is on the back of the booklet that you'll be getting. We hope to see you there. We're really looking forward to Chicago tomorrow. And then next week, we will be here doing a virtual town hall on Tuesday. Then on Wednesday, DC, Thursday, Charlotte, and Friday, Miami. And then the next week, August 13th, we start again with another virtual town hall. August 14th, Philadelphia, 15th, Dallas, and 16th, Los Angeles. And then the last week of August, we will be another virtual town hall on August 20th. And August 21st will be Boston, August 22nd, LaGuardia, and August 23rd, Phoenix. And please, no one at any base, how we put this together has nothing to do about how we feel about any base. It's just trying to logistically figure out how we can get a base visit done, get on a flight, get to our next city, and do another base visit the next day. And so there is no, oh, let's do this base and, we'll leave this one for last. That's not at all in how we thought about this. So we really want to thank all of you for joining us today. I really want you to remember what I said at the beginning of this. You made this happen. We couldn't be prouder of all of our flight attendants and how you all showed up and what you've been doing throughout these 3 years. We know how hard it's been on everyone. And we are ready to help share as much information as we can. Please call the call center. If you have questions, I'm looking at all of them. If you have questions, they will help you with it. Our contract action team members will be out in the bases almost, I think, every day this month because they're there to answer questions. And if they can't answer them, they're Teamsing us because we use Teams and we are trying to get answers to them as quickly as we possibly can. So thank you all. Thank you for submitting the questions. We really appreciate it. I don't want you to think, oh, they're never going to answer those. This is actually really going to help us on our base visits and with our next town hall. So we really thank you for that. And we look forward to seeing you out there in the base. Thank you and see you soon. Fly safely.